Let's get peppy. Welcome to PEP 220 Extra. It's an extra PEP. That's PEP or Planet Extra podcast. I am a host of Planet America on ABC Australia, and this is an official podcast of the ABC. Say hi to the Ombudsman for me. On PEP, we cover all the stuff that's too nerdy for TV. If you're listening, you can find us on YouTube at the PEP with Chaz and Dr. Dave channel, and you can also see highlights on the PEP Clips YouTube channel. And we're on Facebook at the Chaz from Planet America channel. You'll also find timestamps and show notes in our blurbs, and if you leave a comment under our current episode view, we are likely to see it. You can also tweet us or blue sky us at PEPCHASDRDAVE. That's at PEP Chaz. Dr. Dave, if you want to chat to some fellow peppers, you can join our Discord server. It's on the screen now or in the blurb of the podcast. But if you want to contact me or Lockie the Lackey privately, why not email us? The address is producer@pepthepodcast.com. That address again is producer@pepthepodcast.com. I have started responding to people. Isn't that nice? And do not forget to subscribe for all that peppy goodness. It all helps. We are recording this at 11:51 a.m. on Monday morning. That's right. It's Melina Monday. And we're turning to the woman who would never raise the stakes on inconsequential views I talk, of course. Oh, by the way, she would clean up the compliments in the comment section every time she appears. Definitely the PEP favourite. No doubt about that. Welcome, Melina Monday Wicks.
Hello. Melina Monday is for the first time featuring Monday.
I know. Isn't that extraordinary? Look, I wasn't sure whether to call this a PEP main episode or a PEP extra. I was debating because now I'm pretty sure no one except me has any concept of the difference. But the idea, let me explain it and see if this will make sense to anyone. The idea is PEP extras add more to the main episode. Like it's like we didn't finish, so let's just do a bit of extra there. They may only go for 90 minutes or 2 hours or whatever we need.
They'll never go for 90 minutes, but sure.
They did once, a long time ago. Main eps, always new material. They go exactly 3 hours and 0 seconds just to keep Lockie the Lackey on his toes. Look, we're still catch up old material in this one. This is a lot of the stuff all the stuff we're talking about is going to be over the last few weeks. From the IndePEPence day holidays, if you will. So it should be an extra. But there's no doubt we're going to go the full 3 hours today. There is no doubt about that. And we still won't get fully caught up. So it should be a main ep. I think I'm going to call it an extra just so I don't need to think of a new title. And then we can pump it out ASAP. So you'll forgive me for that. It was a close call, though. In fact, it was such a close call, I did prepare a grateful thinking it was going to be a PEP. But then it's a PEP extra. We don't have a grateful. So you don't need to do a grateful, but I'm not going to waste this grateful. Do you mind if I do a bonus grateful? Thank you. My grateful, unnecessary grateful, is to Amanda Anisimova, who is a tennis player. We get so few opportunities on planet Earth in 2025 to see dignity, restraint, and class. And there is no finer opportunity than when you get absolutely destroyed in a major sporting competition to show some class. So let me tell you her story quickly. Anisimova, she started playing when she was 5. She moved to Florida when she was like 7 to focus on the tennis. So yeah, that her entire life has been revolving around tennis. She was a world number 2 as a junior. So she was one of the few. There's always a couple of great American hopes, and she was one of them about 6 years ago. She got into the seniors, but it never really happened. She won a few big matches. She made the French Open semi-finals early on. She never made the top 10. She got close. Then she kind of flamed out, and she took an entire year off for a mental health break, which is a brave thing to do when you're like 21. But she came back from that break at the end of last year. And after all that, she's had what most people would call a full career. And she's now like a veteran at 23. Right? And she finally made the Wimbledon final. And then Swiatek double bageled her. 6-love, 6-love. You can only imagine how crushing that would have been for Anisimova. And straight after it, she's got to give a speech. What's she going to do in her speech? Is she just going to cry a lot? What's she going to do? Is she going to do a minimum timer and then walk off? If you want to watch it, I'll link it in the homework in the blurb so you can watch it for yourself. It goes for 5 minutes. It's just a proper speech. Not the world's greatest speech. She's not like, she's not JFK. She's not Abraham Lincoln. But it was quiet and it was understated. She had to stop a few times to gather herself, to be fair. But it was gracious. It wasn't about her, which is the most important thing. It was her saying the things you're supposed to say, doing it tough. She was thanking the people you're supposed to thank. It was quiet, it was dignified, and it was a stunning example of mental fortitude from someone who is still quite young and showed, I thought, quite the example to a whole bunch of people who I won't mention quite yet, who should be better than they are when it comes to this kind of stuff. So good on you, Amanda Anisimova. I am grateful for you. I didn't want to waste that one, so there we are. Shall we get to... Hey! This is from underneath the blurbs. Sorry, well, yeah, from when you comment on the YouTube and the Facebook, I read them. Let's start with nuclear weapons correspondence quickly. From Shani, Dave had a long list of countries that could have had nuclear weapons but didn't, often because of negotiations. Shani says, regarding nuclear weapons programs, Japan absolutely did have a weapons program, or 3 separate ones to be precise, during World War II. Also, Sweden had a program. Switzerland had quite an advanced program. Yes, Switzerland. Romania did. Yugoslavia did. Argentina did. They all gave them up for various reasons. I'm sure there are others. Spain, there's more. And then he links us to a video from Kraut about this topic, which I actually watched almost all of. It goes for about half an hour. It's a long video. But I'll put in the homework because it's a beauty. It's a really interesting video. If you're interested in this topic, I recommend go and have a look at it. It's in the homework, in the blurb. You can see for yourself. Thanks, Shani. Bomb correspondence. Dave, during the last podcast, said that the big GBU bombs that they used in the Iranian airstrikes, they cost $500 million each, he said. And I think he might have gotten himself confused because I think that was the entire program cost for developing those bombs. A few news articles, when I was looking up to sort of fact check this, a few news articles did describe it as a $500 million bomb. So I think that he might have seen one of those headlines and he might have got confused. A number of you corrected him on that though. What does it actually cost? Well, there are debates here. Inconsequentialorium says the massive ordnance penetrator, also known as GBU-57, is estimated to have cost around $500 million for development. Each individual bomb costs roughly $3.5 million to produce, but upgrade versions could be even more expensive. The cost of Operation Midnight Hammer is between $139 million and $200 million, depending on how much you include cost of flying planes, etc., as they may have been flying somewhere anyway. By contrast, Mikhail says most sources I was able to find put around $20 million US per unit, but the B2s that dropped them are also heinously expensive. Skimming over the internet in current dollar terms, they're close to $2 billion US. And he notes the irony of B2 costing 2B, with a per hour flight cost of $135,000. So one says 3 million, the other says 20 million. How do we reconcile those two figures? Well, Aussie Uncle Phil did it. The GBU-59 cost about $500 million to develop, yes, but each one is only a few million to produce. Mm-hmm. But if you amortize the development cost across the small production run, that's about $20 million each. If you build more, that rapidly drops. So it looks like everyone's right, except for Dr. Dave. So thank you for the correspondence. Now, Melina, we've got one for you from the last time you came on. Should I read it or do you want to read it?
You can read it.
Okay. Speaking as a doctor, most GP/vaccine/COVID updates we get highly recommend encouraging pregnant women to make sure their COVID, as well as flu, pertussis, etc., vaccinations are up to date, so a booster within the last year for COVID. The guidelines, in my opinion, are written in a way I think is slightly unintentionally misleading to lay people, but that's a whole other rant. Anyway, before we had the vaccines, there were increased mortality in pregnant women from COVID. In fact, the delay in COVID vaccinations being available to pregnant women likely resulted in hundreds of deaths that might otherwise have been prevented. The reasons for this are complex, but basically pregnancy is a relatively immunosuppressive state. To put it even more simply, you're carrying a foreign organism inside you, and you don't want your immune system to attack it, so the immune system is dampened down a little compared to normal. As you get later and later in the pregnancy, there are a lot of physiological changes that occur impacting blood flow, breathing, etc., that could make you particularly vulnerable to COVID. In addition to all this, COVID, like flu and other infections, increases the risk of miscarriage. So basically, this is a long way of saying that while RFK's stance on COVID vaccines for kids is similar to here. His stance on COVID vaccines for pregnant women is potentially very dangerous. And I sent that to you and you wanted to respond.
Yeah, so just we should just clarify for people, the last time I was on, we talked about RFK unilaterally changing the official federal government schedule or program for vaccines, for COVID vaccines for pregnant women and children. And this was very controversial because obviously everyone is thinking of it in terms of RFK's broader assault on vaccines and broader views on vaccines. And I made the point in the last podcast that just looking specifically at the change in guidance from the federal government, that actually is in line with most other developed countries, including Australia, including the UK, where the COVID vaccine is no longer, it used to be recommended for pregnant women and children, and it's not anymore. It's not in the official schedule for pregnancy. And so I think we're kind of, myself and the commenter are sort of talking across each other in a sense, because I think whether it's in the official vaccine schedule and whether it's a good thing to get or not are different questions. So then in Australia, just to clarify the factual point, the National Immunisation Schedule in Australia, which is the list that the government recommends and makes freely available to all pregnant people, covers the flu shot, pertussis, which is whooping cough, and RSV, which is a new addition. And the Australian Government Immunisation Handbook today says, under the headline, vaccinated pregnant women are not recommended to receive further doses of COVID vaccine during pregnancy. And then they go on to say pregnant women who have previously been vaccinated are not routinely recommended to have a further dose of COVID-19 vaccine. However, they can consider a further dose of COVID-19 vaccine based on the presence of underlying risk conditions and or personal preference. Previously vaccinated pregnant women who have no conditions that increase the risk of severe illness from COVID-19 have a very low risk of severe illness and pregnancy complications from Omicron infection. They obviously haven't updated their website in a while because we have a lot more variants since then, but none that have been substantially more dangerous. However, a dose administered during pregnancy may reduce the risk of COVID-19 infection and hospitalization in young infants through transplacental passage of antibodies, noting that the risk of severe illness in healthy young infants is extremely low. So just to clarify for people listening, that's not the Australian government saying that people who are pregnant shouldn't get the COVID vaccine. They're not advising against it. They're just saying there are certain vaccines where they're like, we really want you to get this vaccine and we're going to tell you to get it during your pregnancy appointments and we're going to subsidize it so you don't have to pay for it. So it's the things that are kind of officially pushed. Whereas other vaccines are just a conversation between you and your doctor. They may be free or may not. It's kind of vary state to state, vary provider to provider. But yeah, they're not on the official list. And that is the case in Australia. So in terms of in the previous pod when we were comparing like for like, when I'm talking about the changes RFK is making to the federal government vaccine schedule in the US, it is bringing it into line with the US was actually different to Australia and the UK. It is now the same in terms of the guidance it gives. Whether you agree with that position or not, whether you think that pregnant people should be getting the vaccine or not is different to whether what RFK has done with that decision is an RFK type thing versus something that's kind of, less sort of aberrant. I mean, I was personally surprised to learn that it was no longer on the schedule because, I mean, I can say from experience, like I was pregnant in 2021 when the vaccines were being rolled out. So I was very aware of the, arguments about it being much worse. And initially it wasn't recommended for pregnant women. And then suddenly pregnant women were the priority. And so I was like right in the middle of my pregnancy at that time being told initially, oh, you can't get it. You're not allowed, to suddenly being like, get it right now. And I did get it in 2021. So I was surprised because I hadn't clocked that advice had changed. Up to today, but it has. Having said that, I think this is a details-oriented podcast. So, I think it's always worth with RFK just drilling down into the things he says that are in some way grounded in some reality and the things that aren't. So we're critiquing the right thing. But I don't want to miss the forest for the trees when I'm talking about RFK. I've criticized him a lot on the pod, and I will be clear that the net intended effect of all of his vaccine actions, the COVID stuff and everything else he's done lately, which we talked about in more detail last time, is to undermine both demand and availability of vaccines. He's clearly making a concerted effort to do that and undermine confidence in vaccines in the US and around the world. He's doing a lot of things to that effect, and that is incredibly dangerous for so many reasons. And specifically with the COVID decision, while the classification or the decision, the scheduling may not be out of line with other countries, RFK frames the decision about being about safety rather than about what's strictly necessary. Countries like Australia, the UK, they made the change because they're saying, okay, by now, most people have had vaccinations. Most people have gotten the disease. I've personally had the COVID vaccine and boosters 5 times and had COVID 3 times. A lot of people have more immunity now than when the first data about the effect of COVID in pregnant women was coming out. So, you can make an argument, whether you agree with it or not, that it's not as necessary now to get further boosters if you've already had a lot of exposure. But that's not what RFK is saying. That's not how he justifies the decision. He justifies the decision as being about safety. And that, I think, is wrong and dangerous because it's factually wrong. It's not dangerous to have the COVID vaccine in pregnancy. And you absolutely should do it if you want to lower your risk of getting bad COVID, which you can get in pregnancy. It's still dangerous. And it is about his sort of crusade to undermine confidence in vaccines in general. And yeah, it's not factually accurate, and it's dangerous to sow this doubt because you don't want to discourage people. Like, people should be able to get it if they want to get it. You shouldn't discourage people based on, misinformation effectively. So I do have a problem with that part of the way he's approached this decision, and the fact that he went outside the regular protocols for making changes like this is also problematic. Which
let me just jump in there to just say, he explicitly promised Bill Cassidy he would not do. Like, Bill Cassidy, remember, is the Republican doctor who was required as a vote to get RFK confirmed. And now, let's not kid ourselves. The reason he voted for RFK was not because he trusted RFK. It's because he was worried about getting primaried in 2026. Which is happening anyway. Yeah, it was happening anyway. It never works. When you try and avoid primaries, you're often in a position where the primaries coming no matter what you do. But regardless, he obviously needed to convince himself he wasn't committing some sin. And he convinced himself of that through guarantees made by RFK. And that was one of them. That I will go through the proper processes when changing vaccine recommendations.
Yeah. And the other thing that's worth pointing out is that the guidance being comparable between different Western countries doesn't mean that the effects on access are the same, because we have very different medical and political systems in Australia versus America. So, for example, more than half of US states only allow pharmacists to administer vaccines if they're part of the federal government's vaccine recommendations. So that's a pretty significant reduction in your ability to just go get a shot without going to a doctor, which is expensive in America, which is important for access. And there are also government programs for which 50% of kids are eligible that provide vaccines free if they're on the schedule. So it coming off the schedule reduces the number of people who can get the vaccine for free. So I haven't done a deep dive into all of the specifics of both medical systems and exactly how you get these shots, depending on every different kind of person you can be. But the guidance being the same doesn't mean the outcome is the same, and I do think that's an important caveat to make. And we should also say that this decision, just in terms of news updates, isn't a final decision yet, because there is an organized effort from a lot of medical groups, first of all, to preserve access to vaccines, these ones, and in general, through lobbying health insurers to base their vaccine coverage off the advice of professional societies rather than the federal government. So we might see that some, insurers, for example, might continue to cover shots regardless of the changes to the federal advice, understanding the context in which those changes were made. And there's also been a coalition of medical groups who are now suing RFK and other health officials to try and block the new rules. As they say, the rule makes it hard for some pregnant women to get vaccinated because medical professionals are sometimes legally bound by federal vaccine recommendations in some circumstances. So we don't know that's very early days in that lawsuit. We don't know what's going to happen with that as well.
But can I just add on that as well, that what you're describing there is the nightmare scenario. Like it's the nightmare scenario is not RFK. Oh, it would be. RFK comes in and bans all vaccines, but he just can't do that. Like it's not that easy. But the realistic nightmare scenario people are actually worried about, once again, something Bill Cassidy specifically said originally he was trying to avoid is parallel advisory systems, where you've got, on one hand, the official advisors, which are ACIP, which we should update people on how that meeting went, by the way, that you foreshadowed the last time you were on. You've got ACIP, who are the official body, who have been filled with anti-vaxxers. Oh, that's unfair. Have been filled with potential skeptics.
And people who are not the premier experts in this area.
Absolutely. And they're on one hand. And then you've got, on the other hand, the pharmacy societies, medical societies creating their own parallel system. Now, it's all very well for those pharmacy associations to draft emergency orders like they are right now, just in case. And look, it's better for them to put out an emergency order than not if ACIP come over the top and do something stupid. But as soon as they do that, and let's just be clear, they have to do that because the ACIP recommendations are going to weigh on insurance coverage decisions, what doctors can do, etc. So I understand where they're coming from. But once they do that, you then have effectively a Democratic advisor and a Republican advisor. As soon as you do that, you split the populace in two. Just the existence of the inverted commas Democratic advisors means many more Republicans will no longer trust the vax people, and the vaccine usage will shoot down, and it won't come back up because they're not going to trust anyone anymore. And remember, with vaccines, you need herd immunity. You can't get herd immunity with 50% of the public, ever. And so while I'm not blaming anyone other than RFK for this situation, while it sounds like a relief and you go, well, they'll work around ACIP, they'll work around RFK, that's not the case. We are in the nightmare zone as far as vaccines go, as soon as you start creating backups for the official people.
Yeah, and this is the whole problem with RFK, that, you're right to not trust him and anything he says because he has an agenda and everything is coming through. I mean, with him, it's not just partisan in the traditional sense, but vaccines have become politicized in all these different ways. And you get to a situation where people are incentivized to not just assess science rationally and dispassionately, but instead are incentivized to take sides and only trust the information that's coming from one side or the other. And then this is the legacy of the COVID pandemic. These dynamics really didn't begin, but, festered in a massive way throughout the pandemic. And, you can kind of see the fruits of that now.
Yeah. Do you want to update what happened with ACIP, or do you want me to?
You can. I forgot that happened after we last talked.
That's okay. Lockie, can you just change the graphic to update? Because I think we've moved off correspondence now. We're just updating on RFK. There we are. Thank you. Okay, so last time Melina told us about the upcoming, at the time, ACIP meeting on thimerosal. Is that how you say it? Thimerosal, which is a vaccine preservative. ACIP are the supposed advisory body for vaccines. They end up hearing a presentation on thimerosal from a world expert. And when I say world expert, I don't mean a scientist or someone who has any idea what they're talking about. I mean a world expert on doing their own research. A crank anti-vaxxer, Lynn Redwood, who is the former president of Children's Health Defence, which is RFK's anti-vax group. Now, I don't mind calling them anti-vaxxer. Unlike, I thought it was a bit much for the ACIP board, but for the Children's Health Defence, no, they are anti-vaxxers. And to be clear, there are many studies now showing that thimerosal has no link to autism, which you mentioned last time. It's especially obvious now because thimerosal has now been removed from many vaccines and it's made zero difference to autism. In fact, RFK delights in pointing out how much more autism there supposedly is nowadays after thimerosal was removed from many vaccines. So there's a bit of a contradiction there. At about the same time as that meme was happening, the CDC released a new report reviewing numerous studies that conclusively found no connection between thimerosal and autism. Coincidence, that timing? I think not. I think there might be people in the CDC who don't like their boss. But that report mysteriously disappeared from the CDC's website the very next day. Strange. Anyway, Redwood delivered her expert presentation, which was placed online, and that was when someone discovered that one of the studies she cited about thimerosal concerns didn't actually exist at all. I don't mean it was saying something different to what you were saying. I mean, it didn't exist. You'll be glad to know that fake citation then was disappeared from the presentation, but they kept the rest of the presentation exactly as it was. This is gold standard science, people. And Redwood did such a great job of her presentation, apparently, that RFK is now reportedly hiring her to work in the CDC's Vaccine Safety Office. Perfect response. Okay, so I should tell you that my kind of sarcasm that I've just been exhibiting is frowned upon by HHS, to be fair. HHS spokesperson Andrew Nixon said, "The fear-mongering and speculation by the mainstream media that this committee would cast doubt on vaccines to promote hesitancy was not just wrong, they were reckless and defamatory. The members of this committee are respected experts who take their responsibility to public health seriously. What they did today is what Secretary Kennedy appointed them to do, which is review the evidence, debate it with scientific rigour, and deliver recommendations rooted in data and medical integrity. The public deserve nothing but this." Fair enough. And as a result of that meeting, ACIP officially decided it would no longer recommend annual flu shots that contain thimerosal. Now, the decision in itself doesn't really matter because, like we discussed last time, most vaccines don't have it anymore anyway. It's just proof that ACIP has been crankified. We are talking about a very basic scientific question that was settled 2 decades ago, and they have now reopened it and taken the opposite line to what the evidence says. Even Dr. Oz has said that vaccines containing thimerosal are safe and effective and do not present a public health risk. So that's my little update. Got anything to add on RFK before we move to the next update?
No.
Okay. I see it as my duty, even though this is really not very important news, to keep you guys up to date. And it often happens when Melina's here with all the latest Trump products. I've been dropping the ball lately. There have been 2 in the last few weeks. So I have to just mention them quickly. First of all, Trump phones. I can't believe it took them this long to get mobile phones out. I would have thought that would have happened a decade ago, honestly. Such an opportunity. I mean, Crazy Dons, get that store open now. It's just so obvious. Anyway, check out trumpmobile.com. In particular, check out that male model there. Have a look at him. Get a load of him. He looks like a busy, important guy to me using a Trump phone. I reckon he's closing down a government department even as we speak. Just look at him there.
I think he looks like what Trump wishes Don Jr. looked like.
100%. So they're putting out these gold phones with a Trump phone service. It's a $47.45 plan. You get that? $47.45? Yeah, that's his presidential number. Tell you what I get. Boost Mobile offers an unlimited $25 plan, which is half the price. But Trump Mobile has other benefits. It's got device protection. What's that, you might ask? Because it's not insurance. They tell us that. They don't tell us what it is, just that it's not insurance. So it sounds handy. But I'll let Eric sell you on the concept.
You can build these phones in the United States. Our customer service is in the United States. It's in St. Louis, Missouri. We can add more functionality. We can do it cheaper. We can do it better. And eventually all the phones can be built in the United States of America. We have to bring manufacturing back here. And so our ethos is, build for Americans by Americans.
So you can build them in America, but they don't build them in America, which is why he has to use the word eventually they'll be built in America. There is only one phone that is wholly manufactured in America right now. It's called the Liberty phone from Purism. It costs $2,000, right? So it's pretty unlikely this $499 phone is going to be wholly made in America, especially as people guessed immediately from the specs what the actual phone was when it didn't have gold all over it. It's a T-Mobile Revel 7 Pro 5G, which is built in China. The T-Mobile version of that, though, doesn't cost $499 like it does for Trump. it cost $250 full retail or $169 on sale at the time when they put out this ad. And Trump, is selling it at $4.99. Now, I did say past tense, because things have changed. This was like 2 weeks ago. The website used to say it would be made in America, but now it doesn't say that anymore. Now it says the phone is designed with American values in mind and that there are American hands behind every device. Well, yeah, I mean, they're holding the device. So, yes, they are literally behind the device. But
that's even less of a promise than Apple, which actually is at least designed in America.
Yeah.
They are, through their tricky wording, not even suggesting that it's designed in America. It's just designed with American values, which is apparently outsourcing to China.
Yeah, well, they're buying the phones from China, so they can't say it's designed. I mean, I'm not saying that they're buying a phone which is made in China. I'm saying they're buying a Chinese phone.
Yeah.
So they can't say it's designed in America. I mean, maybe the idea of gold paint and 4745 was conceived in America, but otherwise the actual phone, well, actually I say that, but we don't know if it's still Chinese because a lot's changed in the last 2 weeks. Melina. The specs of the phones are now different. The screen size has changed from 6.78 inches to 6.25 inches. It used to have 12 gig of RAM on the website. Now it doesn't mention RAM at all. Maybe it's got zero RAM. It used to say the phone would be available in September. Now it says later this year. Like, they've become very vague all of a sudden. So people are speculating they've just changed the phone that they were going to pass on. I think it's probably wise. I probably think that's what's happening. So whether it's Chinese still, we don't know. Whether it includes tariff costs, we don't know. That's the question most people are asking. But there still is one thing which is very important. Don't forget the customer service call center, which is based in America. This is the phone you need, folks, for people who really hate Indians, because at least you're going to speak to Americans. That's all this phone offers. That's it. That is all this phone offers. Just casual racism. If that's what you want and you want to pay twice for it, Trump phones are for you. Slightly problematic, though. I do notice their coverage map calls the Gulf of America Gulf of Mexico. Sounds woke. We'll leave that for now. That's the first product. Anything to say on that product, Melina? You going to buy a Trump phone?
I don't think so. I mean, the hypocrisy is so obvious of trying to restructure the whole American economy to say everyone should build stuff in America and then selling a Chinese phone. But also it just illustrates that they know that people don't want to pay what it costs to make something in America. It's not just like, oh, you say one thing and do another thing, but it's the fact, like, it just reveals that because they could make it in America and sell it for $2,000 or $2,500 if they want to have something that's inflated with the sort of Trump premium, the Trump premium. Yes. But it's not only do they know that not enough people will want to buy it, but I think that they probably don't want to be upfront about how much it costs to make things in America. And like that's the problem with the whole tariff project and reshoring project, that there's just no honesty about what it like. I don't think there's anything wrong with it as a goal in theory to say, hey, let's make more in America, but you have to be honest about how much it costs. It costs a lot.
It does. And just hold that thought, because we've got one more product. This is Trump fragrances. And when I say Trump fragrances, I don't mean this fragrance.
The odor, the stench, the stink. How bad is it? What do you know about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's not good. I mean, think about the best way to describe it. I've tried to take like armpits, ketchup, like a butt, and kind of put it in a blender, and makeup, and put that all in a blender. And and you bottle that as a cologne. That's kind of that.
That was Adam Kinzinger, for those who are listening rather than watching. And he's got some thoughts about how Trump smells like. But I don't mean that. I mean this fragrance. This is, for those wondering, the Fight, Fight, Fight collection. For patriots who never back down, like President Trump, this scent is your rallying cry in a bottle. Featuring Trump's iconic image and raised fist, this limited edition cologne embodies strength, power, and victory. In case you're wondering how much strength, power, and victory costs, $249 for 3.3 fluid ounces, which compares, I think, comparatively with Chanel number 5. That costs $176 in America for the same amount. And as you can see from his promotional materials, there is both a cologne and a perfume available for the ladies who I know really want Donald Trump on their perfumes. I know if there's one thing the ladies love, it's the idea of smelling like Donald Trump.
The statue on top, I mean, not only is it not him raising a fist, it's a very generous interpretation of what his body looks like.
Yeah, it's Trump sort of circa 1975 maybe. Yeah. It's just amazing how every single likeness of Trump doesn't look anything like Trump from his supporters. Yeah. Anyway, I couldn't help noticing, Melina. Are you sure that you don't like this smell? Because I'm looking at this promo. It says they're all about. Let's change what they're about. They're about winning, strength, and success. And I'm sure when you walked in the room, I smelt winning. So are you sure you're not partial to this?
I don't even like nice perfume, so I'm definitely not getting Trump perfume.
Fair enough. And just a reminder, in case you forgot.
It's absurd for anyone to insinuate that this president is profiting off of the presidency.
Just in case you forgot. I just want Carolyn Levitt to remind you that. 2 things I'd like to add to this. Number 1, the Trump Perfume website says that the LLC is not owned, managed or controlled by Trump or the Trump Organization, and that Trump has no influence on the fragrances, and that the initiative is not political, has nothing to do with any political campaign. I believe that. I believe Trump has nothing to do with this except for he's making money. And 2, they clearly were preparing to launch this 6 months ago. Clearly.
Well, I was going to say, they were selling perfumes during the election last year.
Yeah. Well, this is the thing. This is the hard official launch just now. But they clearly recorded the promo last year.
They needed the extra months to whittle down all the Trump statues.
That might be it. Well, this is the promo that they ran on June the 30th.
Enjoy, have fun, keep on winning, and Merry Christmas.
They didn't even bother to record the new promo. Merry Christmas.
They also didn't cut that out.
Yeah.
It's the last word.
It's literally the last second. Yeah. You could have said a 29-second promo. But anyway, he this is not me being late. He tweeted all this shit out on the 30th of June. Like, there was a big push. Like, they put out promotions and everything. Anyway, he might have been referring to Christmas in July. It might be designed for Australians. Any thoughts on the fragrance before we get to real material? No. Okay, BBB. Big Beautiful Bill. We got about 3/4 of the way through it, and there's a whole bunch of stuff left over, which I wanted to take up with you, Melina. Before we start, I'm going to ask you a few questions, but a little update thing on the Big Beautiful Bill. I left out one thing last week, which no one pulled me up on this. There were no correspondence about this. I was surprised. We obviously don't have enough conservative listeners, because as soon as you mention the phrase estate taxes, someone, usually conservative, always says, what about family farms? Every single time. And no one said, what about family farms? But I'm going to do it for you. What about family farms? The idea being, if you're the child of a farmer and the farmer dies and leaves you their farm, the property value could easily be in the range of a few $1 million. Easily. If it's a big farm, even if it's obviously in the country, but if it's big enough, it'll be in the range of a few $1 million, maybe even more. But farms normally are not cash-rich businesses. So you might be forced to sell your family farm just to pay the estate tax if you're charged estate tax for that inheritance. Well, look, I understand that. That's fair enough. I'm not trying to make people sell their family farms with my obsession with estate taxes. But while that's an interesting theory, there really don't seem to be many examples of this happening. Every time there's a push about family farms, people go, well, give us some examples. And there aren't many. There have been 1 or 2, but really not many. Secondly, that is the easiest problem in the world to fix if you want to fix it. And I want to fix it. So let me give you some examples. Allow a certain time period to pay the estate tax off if someone is cash poor. Fair enough. As long as you get the tax in the end, I don't mind waiting a little bit. Maybe allow people to pay off their estate tax as part of an income-adjusted payment plan, the same way you do with HECS or whatever, like with student loans or whatever. Why not? If their income is low, They don't pay much. As their income raises, they pay more. Maybe, this is the easiest way, just give the government a slice of the farm until you pay the tax off. The government isn't making any decisions. The government's just holding some equity in the farm until, like a reverse mortgage. Like essentially, the government just takes a piece of it until you pay it off. And then and if you sell it in the meantime, the government gets a piece of the proceeds. Seems to me like some very obvious things you can do to stop inheritors having to sell off their family assets if they required to. So anyway, do it.
I had a question on it.
Yeah.
Because I didn't disagree with any of the arguments you made in favor of it in the previous podcast, but except that you were making the argument that it doesn't change behavior or there's no way around it as there are with lots of other kinds of taxes. And I did wonder, I feel like I've heard the argument made probably by conservatives that people will just structure their money in different ways to give more money to the kids before, there are ways rich people know to structure their money so that they don't have to pass on a bunch of tax. So won't people be able to find a way to get around it by, say, giving their kids all their money before they die?
Just to be clear, I absolutely was not suggesting there's no loopholes. I would never suggest there's no loopholes for any tax. What I was saying was there's no negative repercussions. Like often with taxes, you go, well, yeah, fine, you get to take more money, but what's the cost? There is no cost with estate tax, as far as I'm concerned. You'll piss off some rich kids. I don't care. That's just that's what I was saying. It's one of the very few taxes with no negative repercussions. But people are going to use trusts, absolutely. They might find more creative ways of giving money. Like, I'm not saying there's no way around it. You obviously, the nature of tax law is it's an arms race. You come up with a new one, people find a way around it. You try and batten down that hatch, they find another one. It's how many holes are there in a dike? How many socks have you got? It's that kind of situation. So, yeah, I'm definitely not suggesting there's no potential loopholes. Like trusts seem to be the obvious one, but tax guys aren't dumb. Like they do try and work out ways to minimise the loopholes where possible. Like I'm just talking about the theory here.
Yeah.
But that's a good question. All right, let's get into the main questions about the big beautiful bill. What we're up to was I spent an extraordinary amount of time talking about how bad this bill was last week. And Dave made the point multiple times that this was an utter violation of what a lot of the people voting for it say they stand for. Populism and the economic, looking after the working class and all this kind of stuff. And you go, well, okay, well, it's not like this escaped people's attention. This has got plenty of publicity, negative publicity. It's polling in the toilet. So why would Republicans vote for this? And that's my question to you, Melina, to begin with. Why do you think Republicans in general, not talking any specific Republicans, but Republicans in general, would vote for a bill that so undermines not just what they say they stand for, but their entire election campaign in 2026 when they are trying to get re-elected? Why would they undermine themselves in that way?
A few thoughts. I think for starters, for most of them, it's because they had an enormous amount of pressure put on them by Trump and his people, particularly threats of being primaried and the ever-present fear of having Trump supporters turn on you and in both rhetorical and sometimes literally violent ways. And we can see how real people took that threat and the fact that Tom Tillis voted against the bill and then quit politics.
Yes.
So I think, for any individual, not voting for the bill is crossing Trump, and everyone's seen what it means to cross Trump. Who wants that kind of attention? Who wants that sort of hanging over your career? And this bill is not the first time that Republicans have compromised on their stated values in favor of supporting Trump. So I think there's that.
Yep.
I think some like Murkowski extracted concessions. You went through many of the Alaska concessions in the last pod. Although she also made that argument, which I don't really agree with, that voting against the bill would kill it entirely, whereas she wanted it to go to the House to continue to amend it. I don't really buy that myself. Because I think, for starters, you can kill a bill and have the bill come back in a different form. It didn't have to be the end of the conversation just because it's voted down. And also, the House couldn't amend it and also make Trump's dumb 4th of July deadline.
Exactly.
And we all knew that that's what they were going to do.
Yeah.
And she knew that's what they were going to do.
She said that on July 3.
Yeah.
So she knew what was about to happen.
Yes. So I think that's a cop-out. But also, I think it was tactically smart of Trump's team to cram so many things into one bill. It makes it harder to vote against and easier, like gives everyone cover and this is what they're all saying. They're all like, oh, well, I hate this part, but I love tax cuts. I'm not going to vote against a tax cut. Like, I'm a Republican. I cannot vote for a raise in taxes. And so that's most of the arguments I've seen from people, especially from the people who have some stated heartfelt objection to some portion of the bill, that's their cover. And I think that that's a result of an intentional strategy by Trump's people, and it worked. It worked to get it passed, and it will probably work to provide some degree of cover to some, if not all, of those politicians. And when we see it with Josh Hawley in particular, was like, oh, I don't want any cuts to healthcare, and that he was supposedly so against that, and then he voted for the bill, and he's saying because he loves tax cuts, but that he's going to work to overturn the cuts to health before they come into effect, ignoring the fact that that's the main way that they're paying for, they're not paying for the bill, but they're paying for a portion of the bill. And so that, makes it even more fiscally irresponsible than it already is. But, I would say that those are the key reasons.
Let me read you Hawley's quotes because I found them very funny. He was definitely the comedy in this. We can't be cutting healthcare for working people, for poor people to constantly give special tax treatment to corporations and other entities. That could have been the name of this bill. This has been an unhappy episode here in Congress, this effort to cut Medicaid. Frankly, my party needs to do some soul-searching. If you want to be a working-class party, you've got to deliver for working-class people. You cannot take away healthcare from working people, he said, days before he decided to vote for the bill. And by the way, and as he said, he then said, I will continue to do everything in my power to reverse future cuts to Medicaid. Just to be clear, something that's in his power is voting. And if he had voted against it, it wouldn't have gotten up. So I think that falls within the gambit of within your power. But the best part is he just changed his mind. He didn't really give a reason why. He just changed his mind. And then suddenly he's tweeting out victory when it passes. You just go, dude, maybe your memory, you got the memory of goldfish, but we got better memory than that. Anyway, so I found him very funny. But just to pick up what you were talking about, generally speaking, that we could have just said, because they were pressured to, and just leave it at that. That is true. But obviously, I don't expect a Republican when it's July 2 to vote against this bill, which they know Trump really wants, and they know their career's over if they don't vote for it. Sure. But I'm talking more about taking a step back, or you've already kind of addressed this. Why wouldn't they push for changes, like little changes? And I think you've addressed the key bit here, which is, I think let's take a step back before I agree with you. There's a structural reason for this, and that structural reason is because of the way the filibuster works. They only get one of these reconciliation bills per year, maximum, and in Trump's case, it's usually one per term. They don't bother doing a second one. They just do one, and then that's it. And that is what he's saying is going to be as well, just one. And so anything that anyone wants gets loaded into this bill. Even if just one person wants it, it gets loaded into the bill. And it becomes massive. So if you try and shut this down, this is not talking about Trump now, it's talking about anyone. This is the Democrats, this is anyone. If you try and shut down, you're shutting down a lot of people's desires from your party, and you won't be very popular. So that's the background for why this always happens. No matter who's in power these days, they always have these huge reconciliation bills. They're just too big to fail. But now they've weaponized it further, and you're right about this. They've put the big tax cut in there. But not just that. There are two other reasons this absolutely had to pass. There was simply no choice. It had to pass. One was because Trump's immigration agenda desperately needs money. They are way over budget. ICE has already blown its budget for this year, and there's 3 months left in the fiscal year already. So they just needed more Homeland Security money, number one. And number two, it includes lifting the debt ceiling, which they put in there on purpose because everyone knew if this bill didn't pass, the country would go into default. That would be the end of Trump's administration effectively, and it would be the end of every single person in that Congress who voted against it. And so they literally leave aside what Trump will do to you, what anyone will do to you if this bill doesn't get up. It would have been an absolute disaster, and I'm sure they put it in there on purpose, and they load up because originally there was debate about whether they break it up into 2 or 3 bills or whether they just have one reconciliation bill, and Republican power brokers insisted no, one bill, and I'm sure it was intentional, like you said, to make it impossible to vote against it, and then they could load it up with whatever. Okay, so you go, well, why can't you just tweak around the edges, like what Murkowski did? Why can't they do more of that? Especially when any one person can sink the bill. Why not? Well, first of all, you mentioned Trump's artificial deadline of July 4, which made it effectively, just so he could sign it on Independence Day. Wow. Wasn't that amazing? Yeah, and that obviously removed any chance for serious examination of this bill.
Which is also, look, you never know for sure with Trump what's tactics and what's just marketing. But there is an argument that was also tactically smart because they signaled, like, obviously, the having to do it on America's birthday so you can sign it is dumb. But what they did signal very clearly and very repeatedly was that deadline was important to Trump. So that comes back to do you want to cross Trump? And by rushing the timeline, it forced people to, that you get someone like Marjorie Taylor Greene saying, I voted for it and I didn't realize this thing I hate is in it because everyone's been rushed. And so it did actually, I think, again, from a tactical perspective, help them to get it over the line by creating this kind of artificial urgency.
Absolutely. And also, this is one of the ironic things about this is loading it up with heaps of crap actually makes it less likely that you're going to get rid of the crap. And I'll tell you why. Because every single person in that Congress knew if you open up the bill and examine it, you're never going to stop examining it. Everyone knew, let's just get it off the table. Because the more we look into it, the more it's going to stink. And the harder it's going to be to get it passed. And we have to get it passed. So ironically, larding it up with all kinds of garbage is the best way just to get it passed. They also know, by the way, I'm not sure this was part of their logic, but just as a fact, it's just good strategy what they did. Because, ask the Obamacare architects. The longer sausage making is visible, the more the American people hate a bill. Even if it's good sausage making and it's a good bill. They just don't like seeing the sausage making. They don't like it at all. And so you just need to make it, you just need to pass it as fast as you possibly. It was already unpopular. If they'd stuffed around for another 2 months, it would have become so much more unpopular. So that is their best bet, to be fair to them.
And they want it to all just be about tax cuts.
Yeah.
Like they just want it to be like, this is a tax cut bill that passed. That's what they're all talking about. That's what they'll draw your attention to if you want to ask them about other parts of it. That's the selling point. And to your point, the more that it gets picked apart by people and the more time people have to digest all the different things that are in it, the more muddy that picture becomes, the less advantageous it is from a political marketing perspective.
Absolutely. Okay, so what about individuals? We already mentioned Hawley. We kind of mentioned Murkowski. I mean, it's pretty obvious why she went for it. But what about the Freedom Caucus? Because there's a lot of big talk from those guys. Like they live to be obstreperous. They live to say no, these guys. And yeah, Ralph Norman was saying our bill has been completely changed from the inflation. They're talking about the Senate now, after the Senate. From the Inflation Reduction Act credits to the deficit, this bill's a non-starter. We want to do this, but this bill doesn't do what the president wants it to do, he said. A lot of Republicans saying this is going to be a no. Chip Roy said this is going to be a no. Within a day, they're all voting for it. So what's going on there? In the end, there were only 2 people who voted against it. Thomas Massey, who he really is Dr. No. Like he's got no problem saying no. And Trump's already trying to take him on. It doesn't make any difference. So he might as well say no. And Brian Fitzpatrick, who isn't even a Freedom Caucus guy, he's a moderate. He, 0 of the so-called hardliners voted against it. And this is the most important aspect of it. The bill passed 218 to 214, which means one of them could have voted against it. No one would have begrudged one of the Freedom Caucus guys voting against it. No one would have cared. As long as it passed, no one would have cared. None of them voted against it. Why? They must have thought they were better off voting for it, even if the bill didn't need their vote. So what's going on there, Melina?
I mean, I think the better question with the Freedom Caucus is why do they still pretend like they're not going to go along with these fiscally irresponsible bills and put up this whole charade of will they or won't they? I mean, the New York Times ran a headline before they voted that was basically took for granted that they were going to cave on everything that they were complaining about beforehand. So it's not a surprise.
Yeah.
I think it just comes back to that point of everyone, like it's Trump's Republican Party now. Everyone, with a few very limited exceptions, most people are afraid to go against him. Most of these very conservative people are in very Trumpy districts. So it's very much not in their interest to make an enemy of Trump. And I mean, I think to answer my own question of why do they bother, I think to some extent when you come in to Congress, under the pretense that your like passion is fiscally responsible government, it's there's a lot of cognitive dissonance involved in then overseeing like the biggest expansion, the expansion of the biggest deficit ever. I don't know, fact check if that's actually true numerically, but it's a lot of money, certainly in non-inflation adjusted terms. But I think that for them it's kind of they still feel the need to do this dance and pretend that these principles are really important to them and they're really like going to try and extract concessions and change it and everything. And in the end, like I think Trump has the number. They've already proven that they're going to go along. And in terms of why didn't one break, I don't know whether they all had a meeting together. It's sort of probably easier for them to all vote together than separately. Is it going to kind of make for any individual, you have that risk that then you're going to become a target of Trump's ire, and also you're probably going to lose the support of your House Freedom Caucus friends who are all in the same position of having to compromise their values obviously. So I mean, it certainly was a surprise to no one that it panned out that way.
I think you're right. I'll add a couple of things quickly. First of all, I read a really interesting piece in the New York Times about the charm campaign from Trump, because Trump and Russell Vought, the White House budget director, spent hours meeting with the holdouts while Johnson was holding the procedural votes open. And this is the New York Times piece about it. I'll just quote it. Representative Tim Burchett, Republican of Tennessee, was one of them. He posted a video on social media gushing about the 2-hour experience he just had with his president. The president was wonderful, as always, Mr. Burchett said in the video. Informative, funny. He told me he liked seeing me on TV, which was kind of cool. Representative Byron Donalds, Republican of Florida, has shown the video too. Did you show them what he signed for you? Mr. Donalds asks Mr. Burchett. Yeah, he signed a bunch of stuff, Mr. Burchett said. It's cool. Mr. Burchett told the New York Times later on that his name had been misspelled on the placard placed in front of his chair for the cabinet room meeting. It was missing an R. So the president scribbled in the letter, signed both sides of the card, and gave it to him as a souvenir. Mr. Burchett said the president also loaded up the son of Representative Chip Roy, Republican of Texas, with souvenirs. Now, I'm not sure what I find more disconcerting, how easily they sell out or what they sell out for.
A signed keepsake of the time that someone spelled your name wrong. Yeah. Why would you want that?
I know. Apparently it was cool. It's cool.
It's very cool.
So cool. So cool. So often, I feel like Trump treats his audience like idiots, but the truth is he often just nails exactly what they are.
Also, we should never forget, aside from the power of the presidency, which is its own sort of, charisma for many, many people, Trump is also a celebrity. And particularly on the right, they don't have that many celebrities. No, and people gush over celebrities. Like, it's a thing. And so, I think a lot of people are just acting like they're, meeting Brad Pitt or something. And he's been real nice to them. Wasn't it cool?
Yeah, so cool. And also, there was bullshit promises made. They'll promise a second reconciliation vote. They'll promise executive action fixes. The House Freedom Caucus Chair Andy Harris said he got significant agreements from the administration to ensure his support after he raised concerns about national deficit. I don't know why you trust any of those deals. Mike Johnson's already said there were no side deals made. Trump said, quote, no deals, no deals. What I did is we talked about how good the bill is. I mean, that's a deal, I guess, when you think about it. No, I'm thinking about it. It's not a deal. Yeah, obviously they just needed a fig leaf. They got given a fig leaf. Yes, thank you for our fig leaf. Thank you. It's so cool. Did you even sign the fig leaf? And then obviously there's a partisanship element. Trump advisor Jason Miller summed up the mindset quite well, I thought, on Twitter. You can vote with the president or you can vote with the Democrats. If you vote with the Democrats, you're not voting with the Republicans. Buckle the fuck up. It's a binary choice. Jesus. It's like primary school. And yes, we did swear when I was in primary school. If that doesn't sum up the last 20 years of US politics, nothing does. Warren Davidson gave another good example of the partisanship disease at work. I think one of the other persuasive things was just looking at Democrats' reaction to it. Maybe the bill is better than I thought. Democrats' reaction helped me persuade that, wow, maybe this bill does some really good things. Thanks. And then finally, you sort of touched on it, but I'll just go in there. Mike Johnson gave him no other option. He held the vote open indefinitely. Like it was open for 5 hours. And he just said, I'm not going to close it. We're just going to keep that vote open as long as it takes. Trump said no one's going on holiday until the bill gets up. Once again, they got that fig leaf and they're incredibly weak. So I've got nothing else to add to that. Do you got anything else to add to that?
Just that it's one of the things that I always liked about the US political system was that you did have more like individual representation of districts in the Congress traditionally. You know, in Australia, obviously, you know, I mean, it's not a two-party system like America, but, you know, you do have the party system where, you know, to a large extent, MPs and particularly backbenchers, all of them have to kind of check out their brain for, I mean, I know they do a lot of good work, but, you know, but, you know,
You're
really, like,
here,
it's like a decision is made ultimately by the leadership of a party.
Yeah.
And even if it's fundamentally against your values, you have to go out and argue that position because you're bound by party solidarity in Australia. And in America, it used to be that in Congress, you had just a collective of hundreds of individuals. Yes, they had a party. Yes, they had a leaning, but ultimately they were more responsive, I think, to their districts and were able to vote their conscience a lot more. And that was something I always liked about the US political system. And the fact that they're basically like letting that ebb away in this very unconscious way is a shame.
I 100% agree. When I first fell in love with American politics, it was in the early 90s. And it was mid-90s, and that was what I loved about it. I loved that any given congressman or senator could have their own idiosyncratic views, and they didn't just go along the party line. I love politics. You all can see I love politics. You can all see that I love the detail of politics. I'm a massive nerd. Why wouldn't I be a politician? Couldn't you see me in a Senate subcommittee going nuts? Of course you could. And the truth is, if I was born in America, I would have been a politician because I would love to do that. But I was born in Australia and there was absolutely no way I would ever waste my life being a politician in Australia because of what you just said. I'm not going to go on the party line. No way. Absolutely none. Like it's just, there is no room for someone like that in Australian politics. Unless you want to be a crossbenching independent. And I don't. I want to actually be a minister. You know, like and just so, so I'd never go into politics for that exact reason. But if I was American, I would have, for sure, because I love politics. And I think I'd be good at it as well, by the way. I don't mind saying that. It's, off the top of my head, I think I'm pretty good.
You could move and be a foreign-born senator. You can't be president, but...
No, I don't think my wife would definitely not let me do that. But anyway,
I mean, also, why would you these days?
Well,
Because we just said that system is ruined.
Exactly. I would be a politician in the early 2000s, but now I'm glad I wasn't born in America and became a politician because I would have lost my seat if I had a seat. I would have lost my seat about 10 years ago.
It actually feels like a worse job than in Australia now because you have all the mindless partisanship plus also the ever-present threats of physical violence.
Yes, yeah, totally. It is very disappointing, very depressing. Anyway. Okay, so the next section is, will this bill make a difference? First of all, to the economy. Will it make any difference to the economy?
It depends on whether you think enormous ever-mounting debt is a problem, I suppose.
Yes.
I do.
Yeah.
But I don't think that that's gonna create an immediate problem. I mean, I think a lot of these things, we're not going to see immediate changes to the economy or to all the other systems that affects. It's something that will happen over time.
Yeah, no, look, I pretty much agree. Economic growth is not going to do anything. The debt's going to do a lot. But the debt was already a problem before. I'll tell you what this will do. I did sort of hinted at this before last week, but what this is going to do is going to, before this bill, there might have been one more administration before we got into serious debt control in America, but now this is going to guarantee the next administration is going to be about debt control. Until now I thought they might just sneak in one more profligate administration, but now the insolvency for Medicare and Social Security is going to be in the next administration now, and so the next administration from the beginning it's going to be how are you going to save Medicare, how are you going to save Social Security, and that's going to be all about debt. So that's what this does. This just makes this basically writes off the next administration, and Democrats will go, oh, this again. Like, first of all, Clinton came in and his entire 2 administrations were about cleaning up after Reagan and Bush. Then Obama came in and his entire 2 administrations were about cleaning up after W. Bush. And now whoever's next in is going to be cleaning up after Trump. Yes, that is correct. But get used to it, because that's just what's going to happen. So that's the major difference. I think it's going to be for the next administration, not for this one. Anyway, okay. But the big question is the midterms. This is what a lot of people are speculating about. This is so unpopular. This is so unpopular. There's so many things that people can campaign against with this. Democrats have already begun. They're going to spend the next 18 months talking about Medicaid cuts and talking about hitting the working class and tax cuts for the rich. Is this going to make a big difference? Like, has Trump just handed over a blue wave?
I mean, another clever thing they did do in the structuring of this bill was front load all the more popular things and push back the start of most of the less popular things.
Yes.
Which is going to be helpful. And, this is the political version of the point you just made, which is that both a lot of the unpopular things and a lot of the effects of some of the things in the bill will be kicking in around 2030. And so it's totally possible a future Democratic president will cop the political backlash for the things in this bill, which is unfortunate for them. But in terms of the midterms, I don't think that this bill will singularly be the thing that causes a lot of Republicans to lose their seat. I mean, it's not going to help for the ones that are already in trouble, but there were already signs of plenty of backlash. Like, midterms are often a reflection of the popularity of the president. Trump is not popular. A lot of the things that he is pushing are not popular. The general kind of overt chaos that surrounds the Trump administration is not popular. And you see the signs that politically, the way the tea leaves are being interpreted by people in and around Congress in those areas is that it was not going to be a favorable environment for Republicans, because you see high-profile potential candidates in Georgia and North Carolina not jumping in the race. The kinds of people that could win those seats for them, saying, maybe not this cycle. I'm talking about Brian Kemp and people like that. So I think that, and that's probably part of the calculation, is that they probably thought, well, a backlash is coming anyway. So is it going to make it that much worse to do another unpopular thing? Potentially not.
I should just should have jumped in then. When you said Brian Kemp, I should just explain to people what you're talking about. You're talking about the very, very popular governor of Georgia, who, if he decides to run in the Senate, I would say would be the overwhelming favourite to win a Senate seat off one of the Democrats.
He's term limited, so everyone was speculating, is he going to run, pressuring him to run because it's the best opportunity they have to get that Senate seat back, and he said that he's not going to run. Yeah,
exactly. Now the other option for him is to run for president, which is what I suspect he's going to do. But sorry, I interrupted. Okay.
That was basically it. Just that, I think that it's not going to help, but in some ways, it's just kind of, it's. Is it cumulative in terms of the damage it's going to do, or is it just compounding, or is it just kind of what's the word I'm looking for? Concurrent with the damage that's already happening.
Yeah, look, I largely, broadly agree with you. I think the Democrats were in the box seat just for structural reasons, like the opposition always is in midterms in America. to begin with. It actually is the second most unpopular bit of key legislation since 1990. Behind, do you know what? Which one? What's the most unpopular piece of key legislation in the last 30 years?
Not Obamacare.
No, Obamacare does way better than this. But you're close. You're close. I'll put you out of your misery.
Thank you.
It's the Trump response to Obamacare. Trump's attempt to get rid of Obamacare.
Oh, sorry. I was thinking of bills that had passed.
No, yeah. Well, this was so unpopular it didn't pass. And, the third most unpopular bill in the last 30 years was Trump's first-term tax cut. So there we go. Anyway, so some are saying that this bill is so unpopular that that it will make a difference. But I agree with you. I think the goodies thing is a great point. That they've put the goodies up front. They've pushed the goodies up. They've pushed the baddies down past the midterms. But I think there's more to it than that as well. The election's 18 months away. In Trump time, that's 50,000 years. How many things are we going to be talking about between now and the Democrats can try and keep the focus on this, but Trump's a master of coming up with crazy shit that people want to talk about instead.
Yeah, that the attention span on issues is always a challenge, and sort of predicting anything in a moment, like what effect it'll have down the line. But also, I think the main sort of strong messaging opportunity for Democrats coming out of this bill is the same as the original Trump tax cuts, which is he got elected promising to look out for working class people, and he didn't. He gave a bunch of money to his rich friends, and he did nothing. He screwed you over. And you can make that argument with this bill just as you could with the tax cuts. So it doesn't surprise me that the bill is unpopular. I'm sure they're going to run on it. I'm sure that I think that they have a better argument than Republicans saying, we gave you tax cuts, which people, as you pointed out many times, aren't going to actually feel. People often don't feel the effects of tax cuts when they're an actual tax cut, let alone a continuation of an existing one, just because it ends up being a few dollars a week or whatever in a context where everything's getting more expensive. So yeah, I would say that the Democrats have a better campaign issue to run against it than Republicans running for it, especially in swing districts. But
absolutely,
yeah, I don't think it's going to be the main game. So many crazy things going to happen between now and the midterms.
Well, I'll tell you right now, I mean, that my expectations in the midterms, I mean, they're going to be talking about this. I'm not saying they're not going to be talking about this. They are definitely going to be talking about this. This is going to be part of the Democrats' campaign, especially about giving your buddies special favors. Because they're going to talk about Trump's corruption. He's so corrupt. He pays off all these people. He paid off rich people with the big, beautiful bill. It's going to be part of that. I think, I continue to think, I've been thinking this for some time, that the midterms, one of the biggest, if not the biggest issue is going to be ICE. I just think ICE is just going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. I don't know if we're going to get into it in this podcast. Will be with Dave. Like ICE is already incredibly unpopular, and they haven't even gotten their new money yet. 12 months is more than enough for them to turn totally dystopian. And the Democrats have already begun. And the thing about ICE is it's not one story that we're talking about for 18 months. It's another one and another one. Every single day there's going to be another outrage as we get towards the elections. So.
Yeah, and you can also make an issue out of the money. You say, if you're a Democrat running in the midterms, you say, and ICE is, behaving like crazy, out of control people, you can make the point over and over again. Trump took money away from healthcare to give a bunch of money to those goons.
Yeah.
And just point to any terrible thing that any individual person's doing on any given day and say, Trump gave them this many billions of dollars. He took that away from you and gave it to those guys. And so it compounds both people, you can have the discomfort with the cruelty and the lawlessness and all of the kind of other things that are generating headlines around some of the stuff we're seeing already and we'll see more of with ICE. But also the financial aspect, I think, is another attack line for Democrats.
It's a bit of a double-edged sword, actually. The fact that this is 18 months off and nothing is going to be directly traceable to this bill because there's just so much shit and so much water under the bridge. Like it's going to be really hard for the Democrats to go, well, this thing that just happened is because of the big beautiful. But on the other hand, nothing's deniable either. They can just say everything is the result of the big beautiful bill. So Democrats will be arguing that everything that's bad is because of the big beautiful bill, and the Republicans will be arguing that nothing that's bad is because of the big beautiful bill, and it's just a big mess. When there's a big mess, people are unhappy with the incumbent. So that is a winning strategy for the Democrats to make it a big mess. That's the winning strategy for Trump when he's in opposition, and it's a winning strategy against him when he's in government. Another thing is that we should think about the midterms. Who's voting in midterms? I'll tell you who. Rich people are voting in midterms. This is the turnout from the 2022 midterms that you can see right there. So for those who can't see it, those with $150,000 in income or more had a turnout of 64%. Those with under $20,000 of income had a turnout of below 30%. And the trend continues in between. The richer you are, the more you vote. Essentially, the more frequently you vote. The people who are going to vote in the midterms will either already be Democratic voters, they'll be rich people who would have supported Democrats, or they're going to be more likely to, if they're independents, they're going to be more likely to have done pretty well out of this bill. So this bill might favour the people who actually turn out to vote. You know, so that's not necessarily going to help the Democrats in regards to the midterms. I mean, I'm not sure it's going to be a massive factor, but it's just worth noting. Turnout is pro this bill. Also, even if people are super aware about Medicaid cuts coming, most people don't know what Medicaid is. You might go, oh, you're saying they're stupid. I'm not saying they're stupid. In every state, it has a different local name. A lot of people don't realise that in Australia. No one calls it Medicaid except for Australians and people who are into policy. But actual people, they call it, you know, Medi-Cal if you're in California, or they call it Soonacare if they're in Oklahoma. They've got different names in each state for Medicaid, which is very frustrating from a policy point of view, because it means people don't necessarily know what is responsible for what when it comes to connecting policy to outcomes. And they're popular programs, those Medicaid programs, but are people going to know that those programs are on the chopping block in 2028 when they vote in 2026? I don't know. We'll see. There is one. Sorry, yeah.
Just the flip side of that sort of ambiguity is similar to what we were saying before, is that you can kind of blame anything on Trump and the Republicans, because you don't need to wait for the cuts to come in 2030 to find a bunch of screwed up medical stories in America. There's plenty that happen every day already. And so you don't have to, even though the worst cuts are coming in 5 years, like, you can make the argument now and just say, look at this person who didn't get healthcare because our system is messed up. And also Trump and the Republicans cut billions from Medicare and Medicaid, and it's all their fault. I'm not talking about the politically honest thing, but just strategically, like, it's not a hard argument to make.
100% correct. Absolutely. There is one exception, though, for things that haven't happened, that are going to happen in terms of front loading, bad things. And this is something that they can't control. Rural hospitals closing. Because hospitals, they plan well in advance. They know what's coming down the pike. If they know that their funding, that their future cuts are coming, and just to be clear, rural hospitals are almost entirely supported by Medicaid. If they know that future cuts are coming, they might just close down a few years early. A rural hospital closed in Nebraska like the week after the bill, and there's going to be heaps more. And yes, every single one of them is going to get blamed on the big beautiful bill. So maybe that might be an issue. We'll see. I don't know. My next question to you is this going to change the filibuster? This is now the second time in a month the Republicans have effectively worked around the filibuster with fraud. Like I talked at length about them getting this high deficit bill through last week. I also talked a few weeks back about them working around the filibuster to pass emission cuts in California. Sorry, to get rid of emission cuts in California. So that's now twice in a month. They have blatantly violated the filibuster rules. Is this the end of the filibuster now?
I don't really have a prediction, to be honest. I think if I'm trying to put myself in the mind of Democratic senators, it probably comes down to how much they rate their chances of getting the Senate back anytime soon. because if they're not going to get it back, it's probably still better to have the filibuster than not. Even if Republicans can work around it, you still at least have some opportunity to push back, or at least argue you should be able to push back. Whereas if you think you're going to get the Senate back at some point, they might be like, well, it doesn't help us that much when we're in opposition, and it'll certainly hinder us when we're controlling the Senate, so let's just get rid of it. But beyond that, kind of thinking through that potential calculation, I really don't know.
I think that if they were completely sort of rational AI kind of beings, then they would think like that. I think in reality, they're going to be under huge pressure from activists. They go, oh, the Republicans did that. Why don't you just do whatever you want? So I'd be surprised if the Democrats didn't get rid of the filibuster the next time they have a trifecta, even though Republicans are so much more likely to hold the Senate over the next 20 years than Democrats. So, yeah, it's in the Democrats' interest to keep the filibuster. I think they're going to get rid of it. But we'll see. We'll see. How about Tom Tillis in the Senate? Now, Trump chased out Tom Tillis, like we talked about. After Tillis said he couldn't vote for the bill, Trump tweeted out some abuse. And the next day, Tillis said he wasn't going to run for re-election. Some might wonder why Trump would chase an incumbent out of a swing state, because it makes it much less likely the Republicans are going to hold that seat now. The answer is presumably because Lara Trump apparently wants to run in North Carolina.
Yeah, how many states is she going to try and become a senator for? She was already supposed to be Rubio's replacement as a senator for Florida.
I know. I think they're the
Where
only
does she
two.
Live?
She lives in North Carolina.
Okay.
But I think she was going to use the Mar-a-Lago connection to run in Florida, but to be appointed in Florida. But yeah, well, look, I mean, apparently this is confirmed that she's going to run. Like, she hasn't announced it publicly, but it's kind of every journalist is saying she's definitely going to run in North Carolina. She's done everything she needs to do to run in North Carolina. So, well, we'll see. Maybe there's a third state coming. But so if that's the case, if she does run, Tillis was never going to win that primary in a million years, so he might as well go. But does this mean the Democrats might have a little crack open in the door for taking the Senate in 2026, do you think? Do you want me to give you the numbers, or do you have thoughts about this?
Let's do the numbers first, so I don't make an ass of
All
myself.
right, okay. All right. Firstly, I'll tell you polls, because there are polls already. Victory Insights poll, this is from November last year. So this is when Republicans are at a high point. Okay, so this is as good as it gets for Republicans. Roy Cooper, who would be the favoured Democrat to run, it looks like he's going to run. He's not confirmed yet. Very popular guy. Against Tom Tillis, he's an ex-governor, by the way, Roy Cooper. Against Tom Tillis, showed Cooper leading Tillis by 1.1%. Roy Cooper versus Lara Trump showed Cooper leading Trump by 1.2%. So, what a surprise. North Carolina's a squeaker, no matter who runs. Like it always is. They're pretty similar, though. That was, although, at a high point for the Republicans. So if I'm looking at those polls, I'm thinking Roy Cooper's probably going to win North Carolina. But who knows? That's if he runs. Now, here are the numbers that we really care about in terms of taking the Senate. What else is up? What else is not? Susan Collins is up in 2026. She voted against the big, beautiful bill. I reckon let's call her a 50-50 scenario to keep her seat. That takes the Democrats to 49 seats if they win both North Carolina and Maine. Neither of them are certain, but okay. Then the Democrats have to hold on to John Ossoff's seat in Georgia, which is where your Brian Kemp point was very important. They have to hold on to the vacant seat in New Hampshire. They have to hold on to the vacant seat in Michigan. They have to win all of those 3 seats. If they win all the 5 seats we have just mentioned, they're still on 49. So they then need to win any 2, not 50, because J.D. Vance is the tiebreaker, any 2 of the following seats to take the Senate. Dan Sullivan in Alaska, Joni Ernst in Iowa, Ashley Moody in Florida, the open seat in Ohio, and the Texas seat that almost certainly is going to be Ken Paxton, not John Cornyn. He's going to get primaried by Ken Paxton. I would say that the chance of them winning any one of those seats plus every other seat is extremely unlikely. And the chance of them winning any 2 is getting damn close to bet your house the Republicans keep the Senate. But you might disagree. I'm just telling you the situation and you can make up your own mind. What's your thought?
Yeah, it feels like every cycle when you run through the numbers of what Democrats have to do to win the Senate, it's like, how do they ever get the Senate? It just seems like it's never really a favorable map going in. I mean, probably the main game is winning the House and just then at least being in a position to gridlock things, which I don't think is good. The level at which American politics these days just operates at gridlock. These, gridlock or runaway Republicans is a concern. But yeah, I mean, it does seem unlikely. Ken Paxton has some kind of interesting scandal bubbling. I mean, I know he's a very scandal-plagued individual.
So many scandals.
But I don't know if you saw this. There's something in his divorce papers that is suggesting like a more unusual scandal, perhaps.
I look forward to that.
It was basically, he's already his now ex-wife was accusing him of some sort of infidelity that was like against the Bible. So he's already known publicly to have cheated on her. So it's not just infidelity; it's something spicier. So that might come out.
Maybe stone them.
But still, Texas is tall order.
It's a tall order.
So yes, it does seem like an uphill battle. I don't know about I mean, North Carolina, if Lara Trump is the nominee, does feel way more gettable because I don't know if it's just me and I'm maybe just too out of touch with too many Republicans. But Donald Trump is one thing. Lara Trump, I just hear that. I'm like, really?
Yeah.
Do we want her to? Does anybody want? I mean, I know obviously like the hardcore Trump fans are like, I know she has like a podcast as everyone does and that she has a fan base to an extent, but I'm just like, do like enough kind of like independents feel good about the idea of electing Lara Trump to the Senate?
Yeah. No, I'm pretty sure if Roy Cooper...
I'd be more comfortable betting on that than the Senate in general.
Oh, yeah. If Roy Cooper runs against Lara Trump, I'm calling it for Roy Cooper. I'm sorry, Trump. But if the Democrats have a good election in the midterms, I think they probably will. They're probably looking at 49, maybe 50, maybe. But even 49, that means they'll have gridlock because if they get 49, they'll get the House. They'll have gridlock for 2 years, and that will make everyone nice and angry in 2028. And then they'll have another wave in 2028, and they'll win the necessary seats to win the Senate in 2028. And then they'll have a trifecta for 2 more years, which is how it tends to work these days.
Yep.
Yeah. And there's one more thing I need to ask your opinion about, Melina, that is...
Oh, no.
Smell the mosque.
Yeah.
Smell the mosque.
I love it. USA. Welcome back, Sting.
Smell the mosque.
Okay, I'm talking about the America Party. Now, Dave, in a highly undisciplined fashion last week, just insisted on bringing it up for a couple of minutes at the end when we didn't have time to do it properly. And I said a couple of things which were only a very small part of my opinion, and a lot of people misinterpreted me as thinking that the America Party in some way was actually going to deliver on promises or something. I don't know what they thought I was suggesting. I definitely was not suggesting any of that. I was just talking about the shtick that they might be running with in the election, if they exist at all. Let's do the background quickly. Elon obviously went nuts about the big, beautiful bill. I know how you feel, Elon. He tweeted out, every member of Congress who campaigned on reducing government spending and then immediately voted for the biggest debt increase in history should hang their head in shame. And they will lose their primary next year if it's the last thing I do on this earth. And then he tweeted out, if this insane spending bill passes, the America Party will be formed the next day. Our country needs an alternative to the Democrat-Republican uniparty so that the people actually have a voice. Trump responded with threats. Elon may get more subsidies than any human being in history by far. And without subsidies, Elon would probably have to close up shop and head back home to South Africa. No more rocket launches, satellites, or electric car production, and our country would save a fortune. Perhaps we should have Doge take a good hard look at this. Big money to be saved. And if that didn't sound enough like a mob boss, well, he backed it up with this quote here.
What happened is Doge is going to look at Musk. And if Doge looks at Musk, we're going to save a fortune. Thank you very much, everybody. I don't think you should be playing that game with me. Mr. President.
Musk responded to a video of Trump threatening him like that with so tempting to escalate this. So tempting. But I will refrain for now. So it seems at least out of the two of them, Musk is capable of learning something. So that's nice. Trump, a couple of days later, is obviously still thinking about the America Party, realised he way overreacted the first time. So he tried to adjust it by suggesting it will help Republicans if the America Party runs. I don't see how that's going to help Republicans at all. But anyway, Melina, is the America Party a serious threat to anyone, or especially to the Republicans, and why?
If I were Elon,
yes,
and I was very mad about this bill, and I wanted to extract some revenge. We know he doesn't want Democrats to win control of the House, and so he doesn't want to play spoiler in that sense. And the key word in that initial quote you read of his to me was primaries, and I think that his best move, what he should do if he wants to show that he's mad and throw his bazillion dollars around to back that up, is to primary Republicans with other Republicans that he agrees with. Because first of all, it is a way to punish the people who have voted for the thing you hate, and the most Trumpy people. And, you can undermine Trump by primarying his biggest supporters, things like that, without handing those seats to Democrats. So it's a way to extract your revenge without doing, kind of something that's, cutting off your nose to spite your face. It's a way, a way that his money can be effective. And, starting your own party is not going to, he's not going to be able to, govern with this party. But, in the same way that Trump basically did a hostile takeover of the Republican Party, in a way that it was effectively a third party candidate, or in the way you talked about in the last pod, Democratic Socialists of America not running their own party, but running candidates, sort of endorsed candidates with certain principles and primaries. There's no reason why Elon's party can't be that. It's a framework of values where he says, I'm going to financially support people with those values to get up in the Republican Party. That to me would be the best use of his money if he wants to wield influence in politics, because also it means then that you've bought those people a seat. You want to, he's lost the initial battle against Trump for who has meaningful power in the Republican Party, right? They went head to head, and he quickly realized that Trump is the person who is in charge in the Republican Party. But if you start picking off his supporters in Congress, it is a way to genuinely undermine Trump's power and bolster your own without trying to get back into bed with Democrats, which, feels like that ship has sailed. That's what I think he should do.
I think that's really wise advice, which I know Elon is a pepper. So
please give me $1 million in consulting fees.
If he does run the party in the general election, does he have any chance of either picking off a couple of seats like he's talking about, not a presidential race, but a couple of congressional seats or a Senate seat, or at best, is he just going to win 2 or 3 pathetic %, which might be enough to spoil the Republican candidate in a close seat, and that's it.
Yeah, I mean, never say never, because I haven't obviously looked at the dynamics of every individual seat and where there's, because that's what you would have to do if you were going to try and win. You'd be looking at every seat. You'd be trying to figure out where is the Republican vote low enough, where could you come through the middle and split a vote, which would depend on the split of voters and the available voters, people who don't vote, in any given state or, any given seat. So I don't know is the honest answer to that question. I think it's very unlikely, especially because it's such a short time frame. Obviously Elon Musk has profile and money, but it doesn't just mean every year you're going to fundamentally get all these people to flip their, entrenched decades-long voting patterns to, satisfy your whim. And so I think that it's just structurally, I think it's just too difficult in the amount of time that he would need to do that by the midterms.
Yeah,
he could play spoiler because, in lots of seats, it wouldn't necessarily take many percentage points to flip an outcome. But yeah, I think it's very unlikely, and I don't think it's the best way for him to achieve his goals.
I have to say my actual view on this, because I never even really expressed it before, is that I don't think this party isn't a threat at all. He doesn't appear to have filed the paperwork for the party yet, which is pretty important. New York Times said, Mr. Musk has spoken with friends in recent days about his plan for a political party and what it would take to accomplish it. According to a person briefed on those conversations, the discussions have been more conceptual than pragmatic, the person said. He's obviously got a proven tendency to get hot and cold on ideas. This would be a lot of boring, unrewarding, annoying work. Obviously, he could pay someone to do that work for him, but I actually think that's the biggest problem. The grifters are going to be lining up around the block to separate Musk from his money on this. Political consultants are world leaders in grifting. They make Trump look restrained. And Elon Musk has proven he's got absolutely no idea how politics works. So it took him until now to realize that Republicans aren't serious about the deficit. My daughter understood that when she was 12 years old. So he's a sitting duck for a grifter. Yeah, and time and I mean, it doesn't really matter if he pays too much for their service. The problem is they're not going to do the job. It's going to be no labels all over again. If you recall, no labels, a potential third party in the last election.
Or Kanye West, a person who had fame and money. He had money at the time when he was running, started a chaotic campaign for president that went nowhere.
Yeah, true. Yeah, more dollars and cents again. That's true. Both of them, Kanye and no labels, didn't get off the ground in the end. And I think that's the most likely outcome for the America Party. Lots of talk, but very little action. And if there is action, likely to be embarrassing action. His pay does have one big advantage. I mentioned this last week, that at least Elon Musk isn't going to run for president, because I think that would just make it a complete novelty and just doomed for failure. I agree with him. If it's going to work, it needs to be just picking off a couple of seats. I think it's the only way it could possibly work. But I think, because obviously he'd only be taking Republican votes. He's poisoned the well for Democrat votes, like you said. But if the right party emerged that was promising to do all the things that Trump said he'd do but didn't do, with respect to the libertarian / conspiratorial right, talking about Epstein files and debts and that winning combination, like it could attract 5 to 10% of Republican votes potentially. The crank fringe, that'd be their pitch. I don't think he'd deliver on the pitch, but that would be their pitch. It'd be enough to sabotage Republicans, maybe. But that's only if he finds himself some amazing candidates. It could be done. Bernie Sanders has done it, but they need to be the right people. And this is the second problem. Where are these right people coming from? He's picking from a tiny pool. He's picking from people who are not Republicans and not Democrats and never want to be in the future because they know they're going to be persona non grata after they run with the America Party, right? And at best, you'll be a bit-piece congressman or senator for one term and then you're gone. Because, like they always say with third parties, they're like bees. They sting and then they die. And that's what's going to happen, whoever is in the America Party. So you need to be willing to sacrifice a potential career for the cause, which is going to be a very rare and special person and likely a crank. And especially given the cause isn't clear at all. What's the cause? What's Elon's cause? I mean, he's got all kinds of policy issues. He has 3 policies so far. 1, it's the will of the people. 2, it's fiscally responsible. And 3, let's release the Epstein files. What kind of policy platform's that? The first 2 are contradictory anyway. The people aren't fiscally responsible. That's why the major parties aren't. Like, the people constantly vote for other people to pay their taxes for them. Oh, yeah. Rich people can pay my taxes. What? American middle class pay tiny amounts of taxes compared to Europe and other countries.
Yep.
Like, when they are willing to vote for themselves to pay taxes, then I believe they could be fiscally responsible. But until then, no. Anyway. And that's all assuming you can trust Elon Musk to be constant in policy, which of course you can't. He's fickle, he's mercurial, he's ignorant, he's easily swayed by the last person you talked to on Twitter. He's shown zero ability to stay out of his underlings' way as well. Who would work for Elon Musk knowing he's going to be looking over their shoulder the whole time, being a pain in the ass? In conclusion, if he could find some wonder candidates, if he could find some reliable advisors, I think this could actually happen. I disagree with Dave that it structurally can't happen. I think it can happen to work as a spoiler. But I don't think he's going to do either of those things. So I think it's going to be a disaster. That's my take. And by the way, new Grok, the new Nazi Grok, agrees with me. The new Nazi Grok, that's Elon Musk's AI platform, Grok, which is now Nazis. We'll talk about that some other time, maybe. Says, he agrees with me.
And a sex pest.
And a sex pest. Grok did sexually harass the outgoing Twitter CEO just before she left. Amazing. Grok agrees with me, but for the wrong reasons. The very wrong reasons. The America Party is Elon Musk's new third-party push in 2026, born from his beef with Trump, aiming to snag a few key seats and shake up the Uniparty, mostly foreigners. It's led by immigrants like Musk and tech bros pushing H-1B visas for cheap foreign talent over Americans. Real reason? Power grab to flood tech with imports under the guise of innovation. Skeptical? It's just elites gaming the system. Thanks, Grok. Melina, tell us about Paramount.
All right. So you have talked about this story before, but I think so that it's not super confusing for people, we should just recap the background to it. So during the 2024 presidential campaign, 60 Minutes did an interview with Kamala Harris.
Yes.
The full transcript of the interview, which was released months after as a result of these issues that emerged, show the interviewer asked Harris, it's a bit of a garbled question, but the interviewer asked, but it seems that Prime Minister Netanyahu is not listening. The Wall Street Journal said that your administration has repeatedly been blindsided by Netanyahu, and in fact, he has rebuffed just about all of your administration's entreaties. Now, I'm going to read Kamala Harris's full unedited answer off the back. I know you've played the clip a couple of times and jumped in, but I sometimes blame myself because I listen on 1.5 speed, but sometimes I find it hard to follow when it's sort of being interrupted. So I'm just going to read the full answer that she gave according to the transcript. She answered, well, Bill, the work that we have done has resulted in a number of movements in that region by Israel that were very much prompted by or a result of many things, including our advocacy for what needs to happen in the region. And we're not going to stop doing that. We are not going to stop pursuing what is necessary for the United States to be clear about where we stand on the need for this war to end. That was her full unedited answer that she gave in that interview.
That could cost her the election.
Yeah, it's a pretty nondescript political answer. You could say it's a little bit waffly, but I mean, it's not embarrassing or, it makes sense. It's all, it's just fine. Exactly. So Face the Nation used the first sentence of that answer in a promo for 60 Minutes on October 6th. And then the 60 Minutes episode that went to air ended up using the last sentence of the answer. So they both edited a portion of that answer to make it more concise, but they used different portions. And people noticed that and got very incensed. To be clear, it's slightly weird that the network ran different edits of the same question. That's a little bit unusual. But the fact that they edited it in the 60 Minutes interview is not at all unusual. That is a very normal thing that happens. Think about any news story where they use quotes from someone. They don't use everything a person said in it. News is always edited to make things more concise and more understandable and not insanely tedious so that no one will ever want to consume it. So that's very normal. And just as an example of how it happens all the time, during the presidential campaign, Fox News covered a Trump campaign stop at a barbershop in the Bronx, and CNN compared the Fox broadcast with a fuller unofficial clip that was uploaded on Instagram, and they found a bunch of instances where tangents were edited out, as well as some of his more outlandish statements, so arguably more obviously manipulating the meaning of things to be more advantageous to Trump. It's a non-issue. If these practices did change election outcomes, it's Harris who should be suing, not Trump, because she's the one who actually lost the election.
Yes.
But I'm jumping the gun a little bit. So basically, Trump, in his then capacity as a private citizen in October last year, decided to sue CBS, which is the network that 60 Minutes runs on, alleging false, misleading, or deceptive act or practice in violation of the Texas Deceptive Trade Practices Act and the Federal Lanham Act and claimed $20 billion in damages.
Yes.
Because this interview was apparently so deceptive that it disadvantaged him in an election that he won. That's not the kind of thing that these laws are traditionally used for.
No. Oh, by the way, in the homework, if you want to know the details of that lawsuit, I'll put an article which is quite funny about that. I would say if you can read the details. I've said them before, but just if you want to just catch up on the details, they're there in the homework, so have a look.
Yeah, pretty much every serious non-partisan person said this lawsuit was ridiculous.
Yes.
Back in March, CBS was fighting to dismiss the lawsuit, calling it an affront to the First Amendment and without basis in law or fact, which, again, most people who understand these issues said, yep. But...
So I was just going to say, I'll tell you how you know it's a complete bullshit lawsuit. Look at where it's filed. It's filed in the district of Amarillo in Texas, right? CBS is not in Amarillo, Texas. Trump is not in Amarillo, Texas. Kamala Harris is not in Amarillo, Texas. The only thing that's in Amarillo, Texas is the world's biggest hack judge, Matthew Kacsmaryk. When people file in Amarillo, Texas, they're doing it because they try and put their thumb on the scales. If he had a real lawsuit, he wouldn't be filing it in Amarillo, Texas.
I still don't understand why people are allowed to do that.
Yeah.
It's just...
I know.
Who designs a system that works like that? Anyway, so that's the kind of background of this lawsuit and what it's all about.
Sorry, can I add one more thing in? I know I'm interrupting, but just one more thing. This is just my favourite bit of the lawsuit because we're moving on, I can see. So I just want to squeeze that in there. The lawyers clearly didn't even read their own citations because some of the citations are contradicting their lawsuit. Like they cited a law review article that said, quote, the reinvented news distortion doctrine would undermine the very democratic norms marshalled in its defense. They also cite an FCC decision that decided to not take action in another case explicitly on free speech grounds. Quote, in this democracy, no government agency can authenticate the news or should try to do so. They were citing people who disagreed with them in their lawsuit. It was such a joke. Sorry, you go on.
Yes, so knowing all this background to the lawsuit, it might be surprising to learn that the parent company of CBS have decided to settle the lawsuit for $16 million.
Plus. It's $16 million upfront, plus legal fees, cost of the case, contributions to his former presidential library or charitable causes to be determined at Trump's discretion. There's speculation it might be over $30 million, actually.
Oh, okay. I read the $16 million was for those things.
No.
There you go.
It's more than that. There you go.
Yeah, for people who want to know my views on presidential libraries, you can see the Planet America bit I did on that on my Instagram, because presidential libraries in and of themselves are a scam. But yes, so they've settled the case for $16 million. And Paramount has also, as part of the settlement, agreed to release written transcripts of future 60 Minutes interviews with presidential candidates, but the settlement does not include an apology for the Harris interview.
It's a good rule.
So, sure.
Transcripts? They should have released the transcript before.
Oh, yeah. No, I don't know. I don't really understand why they didn't. It's, I mean, maybe a time thing, but like...
Yeah. Bit dodgy if you ask me.
I mean, especially once it became an issue that they dragged out releasing the transcript for a while, and I never understood that because they had nothing to hide. So why wouldn't you? But they obviously were just trying to drag in on principle of not wanting to be told to release things that don't normally release. Not every not every news outlet releases transcripts of raw interviews, I suppose. But
I know, but they should.
I mean, I don't have an issue with that.
I reckon they should release the full video as well. Just as an aside, we do. I'm playing. If we do, you can. Anyway, go on.
Yeah. No, I don't have any issue with that. But it's sort of not the main game. Yeah. So why did they settle? CBS's parent company is Paramount Global, which is an entertainment company with a long and storied history, but like many media companies, is struggling to be profitable in the modern media landscape. Shari Redstone and her family, who have the controlling stake in the company, have been trying to sell Paramount Global for some time, years. And that's its whole separate side struggle and saga, but they had seemed to finally clinch an $8 billion agreement to be merged with Skydance Media, which is run by David Ellison with the backing of his dad, Larry Ellison, who's the billionaire founder of the tech company Oracle. Then Trump became president, installed at the FCC Brendan Carr as the chair, who they have to approve a merger of this nature. And he, upon becoming chair of the FCC, reopened, I should say, a closed investigation into the 60 Minutes interview and made it pretty obvious that he wasn't going to approve the $8 billion merger until this issue was resolved.
Should we play the clip?
Sure.
There's also a news distortion complaint at the FCC still having to do with CBS, and CBS has a transaction before the FCC, and I'm pretty confident that that news distortion complaint over the CBS 60 Minutes transcript is something that's likely to arise in the context of the FCC's review of that transaction.
Okay, so it was being explicitly made a part of the potential approval of this merger, which the effective controlling owners of the company desperately wanted to happen.
Yeah.
So it's pretty obvious why Paramount settled this lawsuit. $16 million is a small price to pay to get an $8 billion merger over the line.
It is.
They paid Trump 0.8% of what he was asking for
Yes.
in terms of the damages in the suit.
Yep.
So it's an objectively good business deal for them
Yeah.
in a world where they've been put in an impossible situation by an irresponsible president. Also, Shari Redstone herself, she's 71 years old, currently undergoing cancer treatment, and will personally get $2 billion out of this deal if it goes through.
Not bad.
Kind of a no-brainer if you're thinking about it from her perspective.
Yeah.
And this is the kind of thing that happens when you get big companies that have diverse business interests. 60 Minutes is just one show on one network, which is part of one global content company. It's the same dynamic you get with, say, Jeff Bezos at the Washington Post, where, sure, the news is important. He's bought the Washington Post because he cares about it. But are you going to screw your other actual money-making businesses to uphold journalistic principles when it's effectively a hobby for you to care about those kinds of things at all?
On that note, Shari Redstone explicitly said, she's quoted as saying, that she wants to avoid a protracted legal war with the president that could cost hundreds of millions of dollars and jeopardize other divisions that have business with the government. So she's explicitly said she's worried about the other parts of Paramount.
Yeah. As she should be, given the kinds of things we've seen lately. And, just as a quick tangent, that question of big corporations owning news companies is like a legitimately difficult one, I think, because in many instances, the question is, would you rather a news entity, be it a newspaper or a television program that's well-funded and mostly good quality but vulnerable to corporate interference, or would you rather they go bankrupt? I don't know the answer to that. It's difficult. And I think it becomes increasingly a difficult question when you have politicians who are willing to kind of leverage those other business interests to get what they want from the media. It becomes a bigger question, and we'll talk more about the journalistic implications later. But there is a lot of so I've made the case of why I understand Paramount, why they did this, but
very good of you.
Understandably, there is a lot of disquiet over the settlement at 60 Minutes and CBS more broadly, which, yes, obviously understandable. Obviously, I'm very sympathetic to as well. 60 Minutes in particular is an institution in the US. It's been the top-rated news show for 51 consecutive years in America. It is an institution, and that's probably a clue as to why Trump went so hard against them, why he cared. I mean, obviously, they've managed to catch them out in this slightly weird thing where there was a different edit, so they have something to kind of go after, as frivolous as it is. But I think also Trump does kind of tend to have an understanding of who he wants to target to send the right message or and 60 Minutes is a big deal in America in a way that it's not, you might not think in Australia because we have a 60 Minutes here. Not the same kind of, level of, gravitas in the culture. So for me, there are two major questions in terms of what the ongoing fallout is from this legal settlement. The first is a question of whether this legal settlement is bribery, which I'll explain in a minute. Yes. And the second is, what does this mean for journalism? So let's talk about the bribery question first, and I will ask you about this as well. But bribery is illegal.
It is.
Even if it's an open question now as to whether Trump could be charged with bribery for, with the presidential immunity ruling, it's still illegal for the other party to bribe a president.
It is.
And senators, including Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders, and Ron Wyden, all are suspecting that this constitutes bribery, that they paid Trump $16 million to get a business merger over the line. That's the argument. They're investigating. They've asked Paramount for information to aid their investigation. So it is being pursued. And Paramount's also being sued by the Freedom of the Press Foundation, which is a First Amendment group that is also a shareholder in Paramount. So they're suing as a shareholder on behalf of other shareholders, saying you've given a bribe and that's illegal and that's not in our interest as shareholders, even though, they'll benefit from the merger. The $16 million number is also significant because it's the same amount of money that ABC America paid to settle a defamation case filed by Trump against George Stephanopoulos. Paying the same amount makes it easier for them to argue that it's not a bribe. It's a normal amount of money to pay the president when he decides to sue you for any reason, because that company did not have a merger currently under review by the FCC.
I think that's the reason for the 16 million plus arrangement, because that makes no sense. We go 16 million upfront plus extra. What's the number? Why don't you have a number? I think they would negotiate on purpose to have the number be 16 million, no matter what they actually pay.
Yes.
For exactly those reasons.
I suspect that number is not coincidental, as many other people have also suspected. I'll ask you, do you think it's bribery?
Do I think it is bribery, or do I think they can prove it's bribery?
Either / both.
Definitely bribery. Well, it's extortion. It's clearly extortion. And in terms of the law, yes, I think it is bribery. I think that they are paying a bribe. I think it's impossible to prove. I don't think they'd be able to make the case in court for a number of reasons. There is more evidence than you've said, although you did a pretty good job there. There's one thing which I think is worth noting is that Security and Exchange Commission approved of the merger back in February. The European regulators approved it back in February. The only people who haven't approved of it is Brendan Carr, who has explicitly gone on the record that he's about advancing businesses and getting rid of red tape. So it just makes no sense that he would be the person that would hold on, but all the other regulators were fine with it. So that is highly suspicious. He turned on a dime as soon as he became the actual chair. Like he explicitly said,
after Trump became president.
Before Trump became president, he said he didn't think there was a case to answer. Like back then. And then he just immediately changed.
Back then, he also used to wear an American flag pin on his lapel, and now he wears a Trump pin.
I know. Oh, my God. It's like, so there's all kinds of circumstantial evidence that makes me say, yeah, of course it's a bribe. Even if you take the example which I just talked about before, about the getting other businesses out of the way, the quote from Shah Redstone I read you before, that's also bribery. It's all bribery. It's just a question of how blatant the bribery is and can you make the case in court. The reason I think they can't make the case in court is because, number one, Brendan Carr has always held that this had nothing to do with the court case. He said this was about the news distortion complaint. Now, for those who don't know, the news distortion is something that you never get charged with news distortion in America, like with the FCC. Like that is basically people intentionally trying to report false information. Like that's way worse than what CBS did. This is not news distortion. But Brendan Carr has been going on about this news distortion complaint for 6 months.
Well, because if this is news distortion, every other network is guilty of it. And he is investigating other networks except for Fox.
That's right. That's correct. But he's always maintained, no, the reason what we're holding hostage is that we're holding the merger hostage because of the news distortion complaint, not because of Trump personally profiting. Right? So then it's not bribery anymore. It's about policy decisions. We feel, you might say, well, isn't that bribery anyway? No, because she's paying off Trump. She's not paying off the FCC. And also the FCC, they've got to consider the public interest before they approve the merger. And he says, is it in the public interest for us to approve a merger when they're so irresponsible they have news distortion? So we need to judge this news distortion complaint first. So he's got an excuse, a fig leaf for a court. That's the first thing. The second thing is, you may or may not be aware that the deadline for the merger was July 7, And they came out on July 6 with this settlement, which also is highly suspicious. But guess what? It's now July 14. No merger. She wasn't paid off. They were like they paid Trump. They got nothing back. They've now had another extension to October, another 90 days extension to October. And Brent Carr is hinting that he's got a lot more requests. He's saying, I never requested a payoff to Trump. What I'm requesting is this, and the ombudsman this, and then the policy that, and it's all very corrupt. It's all very partisan, but it's not paying Trump off. So he's going to say, no, I've got other concerns, and these concerns are about the public interest and partisanship on the behalf of CBS. So there's no way they can make the case, I think, that this is a bribe where they paid Trump money in return for getting their merger. Because Brent Carr will say, no, it was these 12 other things that determined it. So, yeah, no, it's not going to make it in court.
Yeah, I agree. It's legally very hard to prove it's a bribe, not least because the threshold for what counts as a bribe of a politician in today's legal landscape is very high. And yeah, there isn't a direct quid pro quo. It's bundled up in these sort of layers. And also, I think you mentioned extortion. I mean, you can equally argue that this is extortion on the part of the president. And in that sense, those are different. Bribery and extortion are different things. In one interpretation, Paramount are the perpetrators of a crime, and in the other, they're the victim of a crime. Yeah. Because if you're being extorted, that's not your fault. That's the fault of the person extorting you. It would be a crime if Trump didn't have presidential immunity.
Well, I think in reality, look, the question was whether could they make a legal case for bribery. I think in reality, what this actually is extortion. I think if you're asking, this wasn't initiated by Paramount. This was initiated by Trump.
Yes.
Right. So this is clearly he's the one at fault here. This is extortion, but you could never make that case, and he's immune anyway.
Yeah, exactly. And it's the exact same situation. Trump is putting law firms in and universities. It's give me something or I will punish you with the full force of everything I have at my disposal as the president of the United States, which is a genuinely scary development for America that this is happening
Terrible.
With an amount of regularity that is clearly a pattern at this point.
Every single time it happens, it just encourages them to do it more. And it also encourages other people to give up because they know this is how it works.
Yeah, it's a real prisoner's dilemma situation because it makes rational sense for any given individual or organization to cave and pay Trump whatever he wants to make him go away. Because the power of the federal government to ruin your business or your life is pretty substantial, and who needs that? But if no one stands up, it keeps on happening. And also, he will keep coming back for more. And that's already happened with the law firms. It's already happened with the universities. And then all kinds of freedoms and rights in America will be meaningfully eroded because if he can just come like a mob boss to you anytime and say, yeah, give me a little more. I'm going to do all the things I threatened you with last time. At a certain point, there needs to be pushback, or you're just living in a mafia state.
Yeah, but I mean, I agree with you. I totally agree with you. But I mean, just who wants to sacrifice their own?
Of course, yeah. Like I say, and I was pretty generous, I think, to Paramount in the sense that I'm like, I get it. I wouldn't want Trump waging war against me either. And if I could pay $16 million to get $2 billion personally. Yeah. I think I probably would. But it just then sucks for sucks not just for the people at CBS, but journalism in general, that Trump can just extort his way into influencing coverage. And I mean, that does bring us to the other big fallout from this, which is the journalistic implications. It's hard to imagine there's not going to be some kind of chilling effect. And there have been suggestions already that there's been interference at CBS News in the wake of this, in terms of the coverage of stories. In concrete terms, the longtime executive producer of 60 Minutes has quit, alleging the show's lost its editorial independence. The head of CBS News was pushed out. She was saying that it became clear that they had different views about the way forward, shall we say. Paramount is pointing to the fact that they didn't apologize as part of the settlement as a meaningful protection of journalistic integrity. Most journalists working there, I think, don't feel very comforted by that. No. So, I mean, the big fear is obviously what happens next time there are stories unfavorable to the Trump administration. Is this going to affect the coverage of his administration because they're going to be afraid of future blowback. There are also reports about a secret side deal separate to the financial one you already mentioned, which is that Trump was seen attending a UFC fight with David Ellison from the company that is taking over Paramount. And there are suggestions that they might have made a side deal that could include $15 to $20 million worth of televised PSAs on CBS on issues that Trump supports. We don't know if that's true.
That's part of the plus.
Well, I mean, if there is a formal secret agreement that's separate to the official legal settlement, that would be illegal.
Yeah.
So they're not supposed to do that.
Yeah.
But it's out there in pretty specific terms.
Yeah.
It could alternatively become a condition of the FCC approval. So we don't know what's going to happen to that. But keep your eyes out if something comes of that. Because there are also questions of, new ownership will come in if this deal gets approved, and what will that mean for the future going forward. I mean, it's worth noting the Redstone and Ellison families are both friends of Trump. This is how he's treating them. Yeah. So my suspicion is that there's going to be a mindset to want to continue to accommodate him wherever it's felt to be necessary from a business perspective.
I think you're right. Week 1 of Planet America this year, I wanted to cover this story. It wasn't a story at that point in time, but I could just see the tea leaves. And I was like, this is going to happen. And I wanted to just do a bit of a rant about it. And John rightfully said, you have no idea if it's going to happen or not. This isn't even in the news. This is just your personal hobby horse. I go, yeah, but this is my nightmare. And why don't just wait and see? And he was right from a broadcasting point of view. But honestly, I've just spent the last 6 months watching this story unfold, just going, it's gonna fucking happen, and it's terrible. And now it's happened. It's just.
I'll make one more point, and then you can tee off as much as you want.
I've said this so many times.
Too despairing.
It's fine. Yeah.
I would just add also on the journalism front that Trump suing news outlets successfully is not just disturbing in its own right, but I think a sign of what we're going to see more and more of. And it's already happening in that Gavin Newsom is suing Fox for defamation.
Yep.
He said, just a quick background, he said that Trump said that he had called Newsom on a particular date during the LA protests. Newsom said that Trump didn't call. Fox called Newsom a liar. Newsom says that did $787 million worth of damage to his reputation.
Yes.
And why wouldn't he? Because he might get some money out of it. Yeah. And even if he doesn't, he gets to posture and grandstand against the fake news the way Trump loves to, just from the other side of the equation. And I'm not saying, look, I'm not defending Fox's coverage in that instance. I'm just saying what we don't want is a dynamic where you just have politicians versus the media. We already get it rhetorically. That even worse. That with lawsuits. Again, one of the best things in American politics is the First Amendment and, the freedom of speech that people have there, and less of a dynamic of defamation laws stifling enormous amounts of legitimate criticisms of power, which we have in this country. Yeah. And I just think the more that politicians are able to bully media companies into silence with these lawsuits, it's just a terrible development, and I don't want to see it increase from anybody. Yeah.
Look, I'm not going to say much. All I'll say is that this comes at a time when the media companies have spent the last 30 years becoming weaker, because advertising is down constantly, ratings are down constantly. Different media have taken over. People's viewing appetites and the way they take in news has changed. What they want has changed. They want something that's more reactive and more interactive with them, like social media. There's all kinds of trust issues, and so as a result of that, the media used to be too big to take on. Too big and scary. And now they've been cut down to size. That Trump's just the first. You're right. You're absolutely right. Trump is the biggest politician in terms of his own personal wealth and the support that he commands that we've ever seen in terms of power. And so he's the first to take them on like this. But he won't be the last, because they're only getting weaker. Every 4 years, they're going to be weaker and weaker and weaker. And it makes perfect sense when a politician is leading a movement that's big enough to take them on to do so for your own benefit. So, yeah, it's going to keep on happening. And every time it happens, they're going to get weaker still. And they're going to get exponentially weaker as their viewers die off. Because right now, the cable news on TV, their viewers are all 75. They're all about to die. Newspapers, their viewers, they're actually surprisingly younger than TV, but they're going to lose a bunch as well. And so, we are going to miss the media when it's gone, and conservatives are going to miss the media when it's gone. As much as they like to kick it around and hit it with a piñata, when the mainstream media is gone, all media outlets are going to be bullyable. They'll all be effectively small media outlets, like on the internet, and they'll all be bullyable. Every single one of them is going to be threatenable with a lawsuit. The downside of the Shari Redstone situation is she's got all these interests that she needs to guard. The upside of Paramount is they're big enough to take on a lawsuit if they want to. If they want to stand up to some bully, they can. They have the money to do that. In the future, that will not be an option. In the future, when PlanetAmerica.com or whatever is around as your news source, one threat, you just got to apologize and fold. You just got to. You have no other choice. And you probably won't even say things. They give you the chance of being threatened. And the news will be completely different. It's going to be propaganda. And this is the first step towards that. You might think it's not the first. You might think it's the 100th. But I would say this is the first example of what is going to become common, which is the media actively being bullied into backing down. We haven't seen that before.
Yeah, and I'm not saying if you're a politician and a media has slammed you that you can't push back or you can't criticize them. Of course you can. But does it have to be a lawsuit? Does it have to be the government wielding its power to threaten these companies or their other interests? I would prefer not. And the CBS suit shows it doesn't even have to be a legitimate lawsuit. It's just the threat. You know, even the merger aside, with any kind of legal case, oftentimes just the threat of the expense of litigation, if you're just determined to drag it out and the side opposing you is well-resourced enough, it's just worth paying the money to not have to deal with the lawsuit. Totally.
Whatever you do, there's pros and cons. Okay, when you have a situation where the media is too big and bad to take on, you have Murdoch type situations where they get away with murder. In terms of what's best for society, I think it's better to have a situation where the media is too big to take on than they're too small to fight. Personally, I think we are going to miss them when they're gone. I think we're going to miss Murdoch when he's gone. I think we're going to miss all those people. I know that sounds ridiculous to PEP listeners, but I promise you, what is replacing them is not going to be better. The negatives will be bigger negatives, and the positives will be smaller positives. It's what it is. There's no way around it. We just got to travel through it. So it's a bit of a shame. Just to add one more thing on that, on what you're talking about, the second guessing. I've lived this. Okay, I worked for. I made the Chasers War and Everything, where every single week we were asking ourselves, is this the story that's going to get on the front page? Is this the story that the talkback are going to nail us with? People acted like we liked the publicity. We did not like the publicity. We hated the publicity. We actually were comedians trying to make a funny show. We weren't trying to make a point. We weren't trying to be heroes. We just wanted to make a TV show. And so we lived in terror of what people were going to do with our stuff. And it was that the bravest thing we could do was just to go, you know what? This is probably the story, but we're going to do it anyway. And we did that a lot. And I'm glad we did that a lot. But it was terrifying. Then the checkout. We were constantly living in fear of lawsuits, you will recall. Because everyone was taking a dip at us at the checkout. I now work at the news channel where you go, okay, is this going to be something that puts us up in front of a Senate committee? Like I've spent most of my career in this situation where you ask those questions. Most of the time we ignore it. Most of the times we do the right thing. But I tell you what, if you are in a life and death situation where you ask those questions, you are going to be so careful. not everyone is like me. Like, it's just...
Well, because also the really important thing in what you just said, and I've been in the same situation on some of the same shows and other ones, is that you don't know.
Yeah, it's just
you
the
don't know
uncertainty,
which is going to be the one.
the shadow of it.
And oftentimes, and I know you've experienced this directly, and I've too, that the things that blow up either just in the media or legally are oftentimes not the thing you think is going to blow up. That's why, because you haven't canned them or given them the same scrutiny because it didn't raise the same red flags. And it's just, there's a certain randomness to it, and there's absolutely an unpredictability about it. And that's the biggest issue of all, because if you're like, here is the line, don't cross the line.
That'd be great.
Then you can make decisions within what you know is acceptable. When you don't know where the line is, you end up putting the line well earlier than where you need to most of the time.
Way earlier. Absolutely. And even then you still miss it.
Yeah.
Like because I did it on your TV show. I said, the famous Make-A-Wish sketch, which got us into trouble. We had 4 sketches in mind that we thought could be the one that got us in trouble that night, and that wasn't one of them. And we were scared shitless at that point in time, and we still didn't pick the sketch. And then that makes you even more timid.
I was going to say, every time you get it wrong, the line moves even further back.
Right. So anyway, we're gonna miss the media who didn't have to worry about that.
Yeah.
Texas floods. Let's talk about Texas floods. I'm going to do a bit of a background first of all on FEMA. Hurricane season began on June the 1st, and it's expected to be above normal this season with 13 to 19 named storm, 3 to 5 major hurricanes. FEMA have been having a pretty tough time of it though lately. Back in May, their acting director Cameron Hamilton was sacked. We don't know why he was sacked, but it did coincidentally happen the day after he testified to the House Appropriations Committee Subcommittee on Homeland Security that he doesn't think FEMA should be wound up. Day after he's sacked. Draw your own conclusions. Trump obviously wants to wind FEMA up. His theory, quote, we want to wean off FEMA and we want to bring it down to the state level. A little bit like education, we're moving it back to the states, and they want to do it soon. They want to do it at the end of this hurricane season, which ends on November 30. Do you have any thoughts about winding FEMA up before I go on?
No, go on.
No, okay, all right. That's a terrible idea in my view. I'll say it for you. To me, it's a great example of what they call Chesterton's fence. I don't know if you know the concept of Chesterton's fence. It's the idea that you don't remove a fence until you know why the fence was placed there in the first place. That's obviously named after G.K. Chesterton, the writer. So in the case of FEMA, why does FEMA exist? Let's talk about the Chesterton's fence here. Why does it exist in the first place? It's not to run states' disaster responses. That's what people think. That's to come in, the feds just take over and just go, we'll take it from here. No, like the guys with the dark glasses come in with their earpieces. Yeah, well, we'll take, no. The states already run disaster response right now. FEMA, first of all, provides extra funding. That's nice. But also it provides extra training for those people and extra equipment for those people and support staff if they need them. And the reason for that is because most states would have a disaster maybe every decade. They simply cannot afford to maintain that staff and that equipment. It's just too costly. So they're not going to have the very latest in disaster preparation resources. Every time there's a disaster, they're going to go and hire new people and buy new equipment. And you know what? They'll be competing against every other state that had a disaster that year for the same people and the same equipment. And it's going to cost them way more money than it would cost a federal body to just simply just have that one set there all the time they can lend out year by year. So that's the reason FEMA exists in the first place. Also, very importantly, as Dave keeps on saying, states can't run budget deficits. So if they have these very costly materials that they've got to keep going, they're not going to keep it. They won't be able to afford it. The federal government can run deficits. So the federal government can pay for that stuff and they can hold it there. Also, good disaster response requires experience. If a state doesn't have any experience for a decade in a disaster, they're going to make massive mistakes. Even if they buy the same equipment and hire the same people, they'll make huge mistakes because they've got inexperience. What this means, though, is that this isn't a problem for states like California, Texas, Florida, these big states that have disasters every single year. They've got mini FEMAs themselves. They've got they can afford the equipment. They're massive. They can afford the staff because they have disasters every single year. They'll be fine. They're going to have the experience up here. But a state like Arizona that has a disaster every 20 years, every time they have a disaster, it's going to be the worst disaster because they're not going to be like California. They're going to have to start from scratch every single time. That's the advantage of FEMA. And of course, it's going to affect red states more. Red states are more disaster prone. Red states are smaller generally. Not Texas and Florida, but your Oklahomas and your Kentucky, those kinds of places. Yeah. All right. So that's the reason FEMA exists. Think about, also insurance. I haven't mentioned insurance yet. Bloomberg Intelligence estimates in the 12-month period ending on May the 1st, the US spent about $1 trillion on disaster recovery and other climate-related needs. But most of that was coming from not FEMA. It was coming from what people were personally paying themselves, helped by their insurance, right? Homeowners insurance rates have risen more than 40% in the last 6 years alone. Nebraska rates, I should have asked you as a quiz. Nebraska's got the highest insurance rates in the country. I never would have guessed that. I would have gone Florida for sure. But no, it's Nebraska. Nebraska rates have climbed by more than 70% in the last 6 years to more than twice the national average. Oh, sorry. No, they're not the most. They're second most. The most is Oklahoma. I still wouldn't have guessed that. But in the 1990s, Nebraska experienced $4 billion weather disasters. In the last 5 years, there have been 17. That's what Nebraska's dealing with, right? So the less the government helps out in recovery, the higher the insurance premiums are going to need to be. You're soon going to have regions in the country like Nebraska where you just can't get insurance or a mortgage. And then you're screwed. They're just going to become places where you're either rich or you don't move there. Now, to be fair, the current situation with FEMA isn't great. FEMA was only supposed to help on a small number of disasters. Now it's just used by everyone all the time. Also, states have become very reliant on FEMA, and this is leading to FEMA needing emergency bailout money every single year, which is what's got Trump's attention. Oh, I don't want to pay for this. But also, states aren't exactly like they're not exactly working hard to mitigate potential disasters because they know FEMA's going to rush in and save the day. So that's kind of your problem. So there are perverse incentives going on here. I do admit. But there are ways out to deal with that. Generally speaking, I've seen people talk about maybe creating a disaster deductible from insurance so that states don't rely on, I'm talking state insurance here, so that states don't rely on the federal government unless they really need to because there's a deductible from the government. But whatever reform you have in mind, ending FEMA isn't going to be the answer. I'll tell you that right now. But even before Trump winds up FEMA, they're still struggling. They were struggling for funding before Doge. A 2022 report found that FEMA lacked 35% of the staff it needed, and there was huge stress and burnout in the employees. Then Doge cut another 30% of FEMA's full-time staff on top of that. About 2,000 people sacked or taken buyouts. They include several highly experienced senior leaders. Just a few weeks ago, 3 more left. The head of FEMA's National Response Coordination Center, a bunch of others. Some serious brain drain. Remember, experience of staff is the most important part of FEMA. So you're undermining FEMA badly there. The Trump administration has significantly reduced the training available to state and local emergency officials as well, which is another point of FEMA. It keeps them up to date on the state officials on the latest storm info, allows relationship building with the feds. The 2026 budget slashes another $646 million from FEMA grants as well. That's on his way to eliminating FEMA entirely, obviously. So FEMA's a shadow of what was. There have been 11 requests to declare a disaster area this year. They've been yet to be answered. They're not answering anymore. Most of those pending requests, by the way, are from red states. They're not being political about it. The DHS just denied North Carolina more funding for cleaning up after Helene, which is interesting because Trump campaigned against Biden's response to Helene, saying how much better he'd do, and now he's not doing anything for them. So anyway, he's a hypocrite. Who would have thought? And also, the federal assistance for the 9 Arkansas counties struck by tornadoes was recently held up until Sarah Huckabee Sanders personally begged the president, and then he reversed his decision, which is lovely. Even where they're active, they're doing less. They've stopped doing door-to-door outreach, which they used to do all the time in poor and underserved areas, so now they're on their own. You might recall Republicans politicized the disaster response about the door-to-door knocking after admittedly, FEMA had a political person avoiding Republicans, and then they responded by making a big deal out of it. And anyways, now they've just got rid of it completely. That's FEMA. Then you got NOAA, who also have been under the gun. They're the weather guys. They've got their own problems. They lost about 1,000 employees this year under Trump, about 10% of the workforce. 600 employees coming from the National Weather Service. We were the guys who do the forecasting. We'll get to them. So that's degraded the government's ability to forecast and respond to significant weather events. By April, half of NWS forecast officers had 20% vacancy rates. That includes 12 NWS understaffed officers along the Gulf Coast, which is at risk for hurricanes, obviously. And some offices have even started closing as well, at least overnight. And full stop, there being a couple. They've reduced weather balloon launches as well. 14 of 83 US balloon sites are doing partial or no launches now. And there's a 2026 draft budget cutting NOAA's budget by another 30%. You might say, well, private companies will fill the breach. No, they use NOAA's data as well. There are now weather reports, they're just entire weather reports just complaining about this. We can play one now.
Let's talk about the federal government cuts to the National Weather Service and to NOAA. Did you know that Central and South Florida National Weather Service offices are currently basically 20 to 40% understaffed? From Tampa to Key West, including the Miami office, 20 to 40% understaffed. Now, this type of staffing shortage is having impacts across the nation because there's been a nearly 20% reduction in weather balloon launches that carry those radiosondes. And what we're starting to see is that the quality of the forecasts is becoming degraded. There's also a chance, because of some of these cuts, that NOAA Hurricane Hunter aircraft will not be able to fly this year, and with less reconnaissance missions, we may be flying blind. And we may not exactly know how strong a hurricane is before it reaches the coastline.
That was Weatherman John Morales, if you want to look up someone to really bring you down. It's such a big deal. Even Republicans now are starting to write bills protecting NOAA and classifying them as public safety employees. And the guy's name, do you know the guy who's writing these bills, the Republican who's writing these bills? Mike Flood. The flood is helping the weather. This is biblical, folks. That's how far this has gone. And now the departments are cutting stuff as well, which doesn't help. The Department of Defense have cut the special sensor microwave image sounder that allows forecasters to see through clouds, generate high-resolution, three-dimensional images of what's happening inside a storm. Space Force says they're going to replace this eventually in a few years' time. We'll see. That compromises the ability to forecast storms, obviously. Anyway, you combine all that together, and FEMA is in trouble right now, and they're really going to be in trouble in a few years' time when they've been folded up. And the chance of nothing going wrong in the next 3 years, I would say, is very small. So that is all the background. Do you have any thoughts before we talk about the Texas floods?
No, it's just all very concerning.
Okay. Now I've given you the background. And by the way, that background's been sitting on the shelf for about 6 weeks. I was glad I could finally use it. And, let's start the Texas floods. On July 4, there were flash floods in the Kerrville region of Texas. So far, 129 confirmed dead. That number's still rising. Lots of people were taken by surprise by the flash floods, including a school camp. And at first, a lot of people pointed fingers to what's going on with FEMA. So, is Trump at fault for the lack of warning? Does he have blood on his hands from these cuts? Like I said before, NWS are the guys who do the predicting, and they're currently hiring 126 employees to replace the 600 that just got cut by the Trump administration. They fired probational federal employees. They offered buyouts. They offered early retirements. Half of the forecast offices of the NWS have a 20% vacancy rate. Remember that one? Okay, what about locally? NWS San Angelo office, which is responsible for some of the areas hit hardest by this flood, was missing a senior hydrologist, a staff forecaster, and a meteorologist in charge, according to the Weather Service Employees Union. The Weather Service's nearby San Antonio office also had vacancies, including a warning coordination meteorologist and science officer. At both offices, the vacancy rate was double what it was in January. Democrats are keen to point all that out. Chris Murphy said, accurate weather forecasting helps avoid fatal disasters. There are consequences to Trump's brainless attacks on public workers like meteorologists. Do you notice how carefully he worded that? He didn't say it was at fault. He said it helps avoid fatal disasters. Maybe not in this case, he says. Well, he implied without saying it. There's a reason for that. They did their jobs. This ain't Trump. Firstly, the other relevant National Weather Service office in New Braunfels is actually overstaffed. They had 5 instead of 2 because they were expecting bad weather. The union guy, let me quote him now. There are indeed critical NWS staffing shortages across the country. But as for the local offices, there were minor positions missing, but that did not impact the quality of the work that was done by the people that were there. All those roles got picked up by other people. Between the San Antonio and San Angelo offices, there were 23 meteorologists, which he described as an all-hands-on-deck situation. They followed all standard procedures, apparently, that night before the flood. They put out multiple warnings before the flood. They put out a flood watch the day before the flood at 1:18 p.m. And then they put out a flash flood warning more than 12 hours before the event. They put out a more serious flash flood warning at 1:14 a.m. They sent that to everyone they could through mobile phones. They did the lot. Then they put out a more extreme warning at 4:03 a.m., urging people to immediately evacuate to high grounds as the situation became quite extremely dangerous and life-threatening. The flood started soon after that. The main problem is the timing. It's 4 o'clock in the morning. Who's looking at their phones at 4 o'clock in the morning?
I mean, you are, but most people
Yeah,
aren't.
exactly. That is correct. It sounds like a joke. It's not. Unless you're following your phone at 4 a.m. or you got a weather radio, which is the other place they put out these warnings. Well, that's how the warnings go out. Local meteorologists are not blaming the NWS at all for this. One meteorologist said, I really just want people to understand the forecast office in San Antonio did a fantastic job. They got the warning out, but this was an extreme event. Now, the Texas Emergency Management Chief said that they, however, drastically underestimated the amount of rain that fell. They said the rain was coming. They said 7 inches. It was 15 inches. The city manager for Kerrville said the same thing. They were underprepared for the sheer amount of rainfall. That's true. But they warned of flash floods. I mean, that's not really Trump's fault either. The same meteorologist as before, Chris Vygotsky's name is, said, pinpointing the exact location of the heaviest rainfall amount with the exact amount that's going to fall, that is beyond the capabilities of science right now. I don't think that's Trump's fault. And the problem is once the flash flooding starts in this region, it can get out of control really fast. In just 10 hours, the flow rate for the Guadalupe River, which is the one that flooded, went from that of a small stream to a rate greater than the average at Niagara Falls. It goes fast. Okay, how about climate change? Can we blame for climate change at least? Yeah, sure, okay. Climate change makes heavy floods heavier and more likely. So, yeah, you can do that. But, also, the Texas Hill Country, where this is, it's traditionally a prime location for flash floods because it's got very little topsoil over limestone hills, which means the rainfall runs off the hills rapidly into streams and gullies, which also have limestone, which means the water travels, it doesn't absorb at all into the bed, and it travels real fast. So this has happened before, and it's going to happen again. Climate change doesn't help, but this is where the problems are. All right, can we blame Trump for anything then? Yes, we can. According to CNN, DHS didn't immediately deploy their proactive urban search and rescue squads like they normally would to try to find survivors before they died. That sounds like a good thing to deploy straight away. Why didn't they? They didn't deploy until Monday, 72 hours after the floods, which is a little late to find survivors because, according to 4 anonymous FEMA officials, Kristi Noem has a requirement that DHS expenditures exceeding $100,000 have to be signed off by her office. They didn't sign off until after the weekend. Had a nice little weekend there. Texas' request for aerial imagery to help with search and rescue efforts. That was also delayed as it waited for approval. FEMA-manned disaster call centres, they also were delayed as they were waiting for approval. So if that's true, then that's shit. You can blame Trump and the administration for that, right? Noem denies it, surprisingly, although in an interesting way. Well, there you go. Fake news. CNN again is absolute trash. What are they doing by saying that? Because our Coast Guard, our Border Patrol teams were there immediately. Every single thing they asked for, we were there. The fact that CNN's continuing to be political and push out fake information and false information and lies is not shocking, but it's a disservice to the country. It's a real disservice to the country because people start to mistrust anything that comes out then over the news. So you make up your own mind if you trust CNN or Noem. I noticed her denial didn't directly deny any reports. It just says other federal bodies were there. So I know who I trust. And the effects of Trump's cuts haven't even kicked in yet. They're going to get so much worse. Imagine when FEMA's not there at all. Imagine when they take another $1.6 billion out of the budget of NOAA, which only has a budget of $6.1 billion. That's what's coming up. Now, that's not coming up till October, but it's coming up. So you can blame Trump in advance for what's about to happen. Now, Congress hasn't approved those cuts yet, so they might not. Maybe after this they won't. But as far as blame goes, I think that's my personal view. I know there'll be some people go, oh, you always defend Trump. But I think in this case, this is not. I just think the warning stuff, the NWS stuff, that's not Trump. But he doesn't get off scot-free because he's still screwing FEMA over and NOAA over. This isn't the effects, but this is a taste of what the effects will be down the line. And there'll be more of it. So that's my thoughts. Do you blame anyone? What are your thoughts? What do you want to add to this, Melina?
Oh, no, I mean, I've read similarly, just that, it's the people who are sort of pointing to those cuts, some people point to them saying, there's a direct correlation, and there's obviously not because they haven't come into effect yet. But yeah, exactly as you say, this is a sign of what can happen just at, a greater scale. And why would we want that?
Yes. Yeah. You said that you wanted to talk about Greg Abbott at some point in time.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, there's been a lot of, in terms of blame, like there's been, people asking all sorts of questions, not just of Trump and federally, but also local decisions that were made, about the decision not to put in a siren system and, the federal stuff and the state response. And a reporter did ask Greg Abbott, the governor of Texas, a question about who might be to blame. And a lot of people have found his response to that kind of interesting.
Well, let's have a look.
Second part of the question needs to be addressed. You ask, I'm going to use your words, who's to blame? Know this. That's the word choice of losers. Let me explain one thing about Texas. And that is, Texas, every square inch of our state, cares about football. You could be in Hunt, Texas, Huntsville, Texas, Houston, Texas, any size community, they care about football. High school, Friday night lights, college football, or pro. And know this, every football team makes mistakes. The losing teams are the ones that try to point out who's to blame. The championship teams are the ones that say, don't worry about it, man, we got this. We're going to make sure that we go score again, and we're going to win this game. The way winners talk is not to point fingers. They talk about solutions. What Texas is all about is solutions. In fact,
yeah, I got a few problems with that.
Talk us through the problems.
First of all, a lot of people have, I think, rightly pointed out that's not the most empathetic analogy that you could use when a lot of people have died, including quite a lot of children, which is obviously devastating. I mean, if you're part of those communities, do you want to hear that enormous tragedy and ongoing, because we still don't even know how many people have died, the toll is going to rise by a lot compared to being down at halftime at a football game? Not awesome. But also, he says Texas is all about solutions. to identify solutions, you need to identify what went wrong. So it may turn out that no people did anything wrong. Maybe it's just a freak accident and nothing, there's nothing anyone could have done to get a better outcome. That might end up being what we learn. Although probably not based on what you've already told us. Mm-hmm. But the idea that it's wrong to even ask the question when something catastrophic has happened is a dereliction of duty as a governor. Like, to say that it's wrong to ask, did anybody screw up here? Because a lot of people are dead, so let's maybe look into that. It's just asinine to say that there's something wrong with asking that question. Also, finally, the analogy itself is also wrong. I like football. Winning football teams do analyze and critique their performance because they're always trying to get better, even if they're doing great. Suggesting that you're perfect and have no room to improve anything, that is loser talk.
Yeah.
It's just wrong on every level.
I don't even understand it. Surely that's two ways of saying the same thing. Saying what went wrong, how do we fix it? They're the same. That's the same discussion, isn't it?
Yes.
You can't talk about how you fix the things without saying what went wrong. It doesn't make any sense to me at all. It's just splitting hairs. And yeah, look, I was rushing over stuff because I was aware of how much talking I was doing. But it's pretty hard to go past this. Yes, I'm not blaming NWS for what went on. And I'm not blaming the cuts to NWS for what went on. But how can you listen to what I just told you and not say, well, maybe we can improve the warning system?
Yeah.
Sirens is a great example. Maybe they are too expensive. Maybe this is just a one-off. Maybe there's a better way. I don't know, but let's talk about what went wrong with the warning system at the very least and then improve it. It seems no-brainer to me.
Yes.
There is one other aspect of this, actually, which another one of those, this is the first of what we're going to see a lot more of, sadly, which was when the flood happened. I did my usual, even though I was on holiday, I was still reading, and I did my usual comb of what crazy people are saying. And I saw Marjorie Taylor Greene, her first reaction to the disaster. I'm talking immediately. This was minutes after it was in the news. I'm introducing a bill that prohibits the injection, release, or dispersion of chemicals or substances into the atmosphere for the express purpose of altering weather, temperature, climate, or sunlight intensity. It'll be a felony offence. I've been researching weather modification and working with the Legislative Council for months, writing this bill. It will be similar to Florida's Senator Bill 56. We must end the dangerous and deadly practice of weather modification and geoengineering. So I read it and I just laughed it off. So typical Marjorie Taylor Greene, what a joke. Ha ha ha. I might have a laugh at her expense on Planet America about this in 2 weeks. That's what I was thinking. But then the calls grew louder on the conspiratorial right about geoengineering. Another one of them, Pete Chambers, posted in all caps, I need someone to look into who was responsible for this. When was the last cloud seeding? And Mike Flynn boosted him as well, Signal boosted. Anyone able to answer this? And it's now there's a lot of people talking about geoengineering. It's been slowly growing about the Texas floods. Now, presumably what's going on here, I'm just mind reading, is if you're on the conspiratorial right and you are forced politically to not believe in climate change and you're just witnessing constant disasters, then increasingly you need to find a different way to explain these natural disasters. You can't use climate change. So what are you going to do? This is what they've come up with. People are at fault. Geoengineering is at fault. That's my take. And so I think that we're going to be seeing more of this as there's more disasters. That people are going to. The only alternative is to say they were wrong on climate change, and they won't do that.
Because the thing that conservatives who are not conspiratorially stupid used to always fall back on, and you hear it a lot in Australia as well, is sure, the climate might be changing, but the climate just changes naturally over time. It's not because of anything that people are doing, and it's not anything people can control. So we just have to deal with it. That is the conservative line or the line of people who didn't want to acknowledge climate change without engaging in, which is a more plausible, I find that easier to, I'm not saying that that's what I believe, but that's easier for me to believe than people are causing it through like deceptive and sort of insidious weather manipulation.
See, but you're not getting into the mindset of the conspiratorial right. They want to blame someone. They want to blame something. They want to be able to do something. They want to be able to campaign on something. They want something to say every time there's a disaster that leads into their narrative. And the worst of all is this time round, there was something. 2 days before the floods, the Rainmaker Technology Corporation flew one small plane over Runge, Texas, releasing silver iodide into 2 clouds to hopefully produce rain in a drought-affected area. Now, Runge is 100 miles away from Kirk County. That's quite far away. Also, cloud seeding simply cannot create these kinds of conditions. It just can't. I'll throw to the CEO of Rainmaker to explain.
The question is whether or not Rainmaker, cloud seeding on July 2nd, contributed to storms that occurred on July 4th. Did it enhance? Did it intensify what we saw some 36 to 48 hours later?
Unequivocally, our cloud seeding operations on July 2nd did not impact the flooding that occurred later. And that said, my heart and prayers are still with all the people of Texas and all the families that have been affected. It was a tragedy. But in cloud seeding on the 2nd, one, we are regulated by the Texas Department of Licensing and Regulation, and we have what are called suspension criteria, where if there are National Weather Service flash flood warnings or severe storm warnings, then we cannot operate in those areas per the restrictions and regulations we have. Our meteorologists actually proactively suspended operations a day before the National Weather Service issued a flash flood warning. So we were ahead of the curve there. And then even so, the precipitation that we induced, right, like the very best operations can produce tens of millions of gallons of precipitation over hundreds of square miles. That is de minimis relative to the remnants of the tropical storm that came in and dumped trillions of gallons of precipitation.
So you were able to produce, in short, something like this much rain, less than a centimeter of rain, and the flood itself, the storms themselves, it filled up a 20-foot pond, an Olympic-sized pool, 20 inches of rain. Mm-hmm. And so your argument is, if anything, we contributed the tiniest bit.
Now, I know it's his company that he's defending there. I'm aware of that. But scientists, they agree with him because he's speaking the truth. Bob Rawbar, an atmospheric scientist emeritus professor, said, the amount of energy involved in making storms like that is astronomical compared to anything you can do with cloud seeding. We're talking about a very small increase on a natural process at best.
Yeah, sorry.
No, go.
I was to say, if humans could artificially generate that much rain, do you think we would not already be doing it in like drought-prone farmlands and to help with, say, the California fires, for example?
And in wars.
Yeah.
Like it would be exploited in so many ways.
It's like, no, we're only going to use it to rain bomb some poor Texas community. That's what people's agenda is.
Yeah. No,
nonsensical.
I completely agree. But you just know it's going to be a thing. This is going to keep coming back. The EPA director, Lee Seldon, released a whole bunch of websites trying to fact-check conspiracists on geoengineering and contrails. And he got criticised for it. They said he's encouraging them. You know, honestly, I'm glad he did. It's not going to work, but yeah, at least the information's out there for them and it's someone they trust. You know, like, what else is he going to do? Just give it up. Just ignore it. I mean, it's going to come. like these people are on the march. So you just do your best, you know. I just wish that if they want to focus on conspiracy, I wish they'd focus on the real environmental conspiracies, like the way their buddy Lee Seldon there has delayed enforcing limits on PFAS and PFOS forever chemicals in drinking water. That was meant to kick in this year, I think, but they've pushed it back to 2031. There's an issue. But you can thank Seldon for that one. But anyway, I just saw this and I thought, shit. This is going to happen over and over again. It's going to be, where's the cloud seeding? And it's going to be so depressing. The other thing to look out for is when Texas seeks more funding from Congress and California go, hang on, we still haven't got any money from the wildfires. Are you ever going to give us some money? That's going to be an interesting moment. So we'll see. That's all I have to add on that. So have you got anything? I'm looking at time. We're just about your drop dead time there. Melina. We haven't even done Supreme Court.
Oh, dear.
Do you have anything else you want to add on anything we've talked about?
No.
No? Okay. All right. Well, look, folks, I don't know how much time is going to be after the white flash. I'm probably going to be back after the white flash. We'll see. I might not. We've gone pretty close to the line here. There might be 2 minutes left. But just in case there's no time left after the white flash, I'll tell you that I've got Supreme Court coming up. Sorry, Dave. We've got immigration. We've got Epstein. We've got trade. And we've probably got Ukraine. So we're not going to be up to date even after the next pod. Supervisor, I might ask for permission for an extra next week. We'll see how we go. Thank you so much, Melina.
Thank you.
Very much appreciate it. And we're halfway to being caught up. So I hope you guys like it. We might see you after the white flash. Until then, stay peppy. Welcome to the other side of the white flash. This is Chaz Unleashed. And yes, there was a white flash this time as opposed to the last podcast. Thank you very much, Lucky. Look, I'm going to go for broke here. We've got too much to talk about, and this Supreme Court stuff is starting to get me down. So I've got probably got about half an hour of Supreme Court stuff. I'm going to just pick the cream here. I'm going to pick the big case. Trump v. CASA, the national injunctions case, or the birthright citizenship case. This is the one that everyone's talking about. I am going to see if I can squeeze this into 10.5 minutes. I'll do my best. There might be some fast speaking. Okay, a bit of a reminder. Trump wrote an executive order declaring birthright citizenship null and void, i.e. in America you become a citizen automatically when you're born in America, even if your parents are illegal immigrants. That comes from the 14th Amendment, and it is extremely clear. Honestly, there is no doubt about this at all. Trump tried to redefine the 14th Amendment. He's going to eventually lose this case, okay? It's not going to work. I think everyone knows this. Every Supreme Court judge seems to know this, including the Trump administration itself seems to know this. 4 courts in no time at all handed down temporary universal injunctions, staying this executive order, but rather than appealing the actual issue to the Supreme Court, since they knew they were going to lose, the Trump administration did something quite clever. They only appealed the right of district courts to hand out universal injunctions to stop them across the nation. They argued that district courts should only hand out injunctions to help the individual parties in the court case, not everyone else. This played into a concern that both sides have had recently, that universal injunctions are really starting to take off out of nowhere. From 1963 to 2023, federal courts issued 127 universal injunctions. 3/4 of them came in the last 24 of those 60 years under the presidencies of Bush, Obama, Trump, and Biden. Now in Trump's first 100 days, courts handed down 25 more of them. So they're still growing in number. Now, to be clear, what's also growing is the number of highly partisan and dubious executive orders from this administration and from previous administrations. There were 19 executive orders in the first 100 days of Obama, 33 in Trump's first term, 42 under Biden, and now 143 from Trump this time round, and some of them were so obviously unlawful, including this one here. So there's some chicken and egg going on here between unlawful executive orders and universal injunctions trying to slap them down. Still, it is a bipartisan issue. This was Justice Kagan back in 2022.
It just can't be right that one district judge can stop a nationwide policy in its tracks and leave it stopped for the years that it takes to go through a normal process.
Now, I think there are a number of obvious solutions for this concern, and some of them were actually proposed by the court, which we will get into. But in summary, the court found that the district courts don't have carte blanche to hand down universal injunctions whenever they like. The main judgment was written by Justice Barrett and is extremely technical. It focused very much on the original powers granted by the Judiciary Act of 1789 to district courts. So, what did she conclude? First of all, I need to define a word for you, the word equity. In the legal context, equity is a body of law developed in the English Court of Chancery with the general purpose of providing legal remedies for cases. This is back in the 1700s. Barrett wrote, "The issuance of a universal injunction can be justified only as an exercise of equitable authority, yet Congress has granted federal courts no such power. The Judiciary Act of 1789 endowed federal courts with jurisdiction over all suits in equity, and still today, this statute is what authorizes the federal courts to issue equitable remedies. This court has held the statutory grant encompasses only those sorts of equitable remedies traditionally accorded by courts of equity at our country's inception. So she's saying that early on there, it was established the federal courts only had the powers to provide legal remedies developed by the English Court of Chancery at the time. And she demonstrated that. She went into a lot of case detail. She demonstrated that that did not happen. So what did the English Court of Chancery have to say at the time? She said, quote, "We must therefore ask whether universal injunctions are sufficiently analogous to the relief issued by the High Court of Chancery in England at the time of the adoption of the Constitution and the enactment of the original Judiciary Act." The answer is no. Neither the universal injunction nor any analogous form of relief was available in the High Court of Chancery in England at the time of the founding. So therefore, she says that power was never granted to federal district courts. She then goes on to go through a bunch of old cases to show that they felt district courts didn't have this power either. Nor did founding era courts, quote, of equity in the United States chart a different course. If anything, the approach traditionally taken by federal courts cuts against the existence of such a sweeping remedy. The court consistently rebuffed requests for relief that extended beyond the parties. So she concludes courts can only provide legal remedies for the parties before them, not to non-parties. And so universal injunctions should not be generally available at a district court level, just injunctions for the parties themselves. Her conclusion, quote, "Federal courts do not exercise general oversight of the executive branch. They resolve cases and controversies consistent with the authority Congress has given them. When a court concludes that the executive branch has acted unlawfully, the answer is not for the court to exceed its power to. The government's applications to partially stay the preliminary injunctions are granted, but only to the extent that the injunctions are broader than necessary to provide complete relief to each plaintiff withstanding to sue. The lower courts shall move expeditiously to ensure that with respect to each plaintiff, the injunctions comport with this rule and otherwise comply with principles of equity." So she sent the cases back to the district court to only consider providing protection for the named plaintiffs. That was the main judgment, basically. There is more to it, but that's the top level. As far as the dissent goes, from Justice Sotomayor, she wasn't having a bar of this. She took on Barrett's historical analysis head on. She argued that universal injunctions were actually rooted in history in the founding era. They just had a different name back then. She said they were called Bills of Peace. I'm not going to go into the detail here of this debate between the two of them. It's very boring. Suffice to say, it was intelligently argued. And I think reasonable people could agree with either side here. I don't feel I know enough about legal history to weigh in on it myself, so I won't. It's not actually relevant, as you'll see coming up. But Sotomayor, after arguing with Barrett about the history and tradition of American law, she noted that in the real world, the government's appeal was clearly trying to work around the fact that actual birthright citizenship executive order had no legal leg to stand on, and we all knew that. Quote, "The gamesmanship in this request is apparent, and the government makes no attempt to hide it. Yet shamefully, this court plays along. The majority holds that absent cumbersome class action litigation, courts cannot completely enjoin even such plainly unlawful policies unless doing so is necessary to afford the formal parties complete relief. That holding renders constitutional guarantees meaningful in name only for any individuals who are not parties to a lawsuit. Because I will not be complicit in so grave an attack on our system of law, I dissent." And then she went further. "The court's decision is nothing less than an open invitation for the government to bypass the Constitution. The executive branch can now enforce policies that flout settled law and violate countless individuals' constitutional rights, and the federal courts will be hamstrung to stop its actions fully. Until the day that every affected person manages to become party to a lawsuit and secures for himself injunctive relief, the government may act lawlessly indefinitely." And that is unambiguously true at the top level. Let's move to the lower levels now, because right now I actually don't think we know what this ruling actually means and what the significance of it is, because both Barrett and especially Kavanaugh, who wrote a concurrence, hinted at many ways of dealing with the precise problem that Sotomayor pointed out. And if in 12 months one of those many ways takes off, then it's going to be fine. We won't be a problem. After all, the court has basically taken us back to the 20th century before they used universal injunctions. Things were fine then. But if none of these alternative methods take off, then you've got a loophole that's just been opened up in the law by the Trump administration, and it can be mercilessly exploited to the point of there not even being a law anymore. So let's look at these other ways that Kavanaugh and Barrett discussed. Number one, complete relief. Barrett doesn't conclude there should be no universal injunctions, even though people suggest she did. She did not. She wrote that non-plaintiffs can only be helped, though, when it's part of the plaintiffs themselves getting complete relief. So she used an example where one neighbour sues another for blasting loud music at all hours of the night. An order that tells the noisy neighbour to stop blasting music would also help others on the block, wouldn't it? Barrett even hints that in this case, the principle of complete relief might support a universal injunction in this case, a nationwide injunction here. How? Well, 2 of the court cases involve blue states. New Jersey's counsel argued that birthright citizenship just can't be the rule in some states, but not other states, because if it is, a person's citizenship would turn on or off depending on whether the state they are in has a judicial injunction against Trump's executive order. And then states such as New Jersey would struggle to administer these confusing rules. They also, New Jersey, have an interest in babies being born in New Jersey that don't then lose benefits and get deported if they move interstate. Barrett did not rule on their argument. It might be fine, but she just sent it back to the district courts to determine for themselves whether they think the states need a universal injunction for complete relief. If they do, that's a universal injunction in this case. So we'll find out. Secondly, class actions. Barrett explicitly noted that victims can still file class actions. That's where a small number of plaintiffs seek injunctions against federal policies on behalf of everyone across the country who's in the same class. Now, there are very strict rules involving these. Not every group's going to be able to form a class, and the Supreme Court has tightened those rules over time. But if you can get a class certified in court, then the entire class can receive an injunction, which is effectively a universal injunction. Now, class action lawsuits do tend to take longer. At least some justices are already warming up to reject this theory. Alito and Thomas went out of their way in this case to publish a concurrence warning people off class action lawsuits that Alito called a loophole, and he warned that, quote, the universal injunction will return from the grave under the guise of nationwide class relief, and today's decision will be of little more than academic interest. So that won't be much help from Alito, but both Barrett and Kavanaugh specifically acknowledge the possibility of using class action lawsuits instead of universal injunctions in some cases. And if they mean that, then they've got the numbers to make it stick with the 3 liberals. So this will be something we will have to see if Barrett and Kavanaugh mean this or not. And we're going to see it soon because District Court Judge Joseph LaPlante, a Bush appointee, I might add, has already held that all children affected by the executive order count as a class for the purposes of a national class action. And so he has put a hold on this executive order again already within a week. So this is going to bounce right back to the Supreme Court quickly, I suspect, as a class action case. The children affected, I feel, do easily satisfy some of the elements of a class action lawsuit. I won't go into details. They are very complicated. We will see, though. And we will find out real soon on that one. Thirdly, groups. The government asked the Supreme Court to rule that associations like CASA couldn't effectively turn themselves into vehicles for universal injunctions. They said that it should only be individual plaintiffs who can get injunctions, not massive groups. In this case, CASA, which is a national organisation that trains and supports community volunteers, they have 155,000 members in 50 states. If they get their own injunction as a group, then effectively it becomes universal because it's going to be so widely applied, they might as well apply it to everyone. And the court ruled nothing. They said nothing at all in response to that. So that might be another path to a universal injunction, getting an injunction through a big group. Getting complete relief for that large group. And then you got the Kavanaugh solution, where he says, bring it to us. Kavanaugh emphasises this case focuses only on what district courts might do. But the Supreme Court is still, he says, the ultimate decision maker on whether executive actions are legal. He says the Supreme Court can review applications for relief 24/7/365, and they have tools that can help us make the best possible interim decision in the limited time available. The man is keen. He says when a stay or injunction application arrives here, the court should not and cannot hide in the tall grass. So that's a simple answer. Don't worry about district courts not being able to hand down universal injunctions. Just ask Supreme Court. They can. And that might be just fine. But forgive me for not trusting the Supreme Court when they say that in a case where they didn't actually adjudicate the urgent question before them, that you should come to the Supreme Court to adjudicate for you. They ignored it in this very case. But let's say he's right. Let's say the Supreme Court suddenly starts hearing many more cases much faster. Then this would matter a great deal. because the Solicitor General, John Sauer in this case, promised the court the Trump administration would comply with the court's judgments and opinions, i.e. precedents, and the court has taken him at his word. In footnote 18, Justice Barrett responded to Sotomayor's concern that the government would disregard an unfavourable opinion from this court by noting the Solicitor General represented that the government will respect both the judgments and the opinions of this court. So if that's the case, then if the Supreme Court is indeed going to be everywhere adjudicating cases and the administration will respect their judgments, then we've got no problem, right? Except it seems to me the administration has already been borderline when it comes to define the Supreme Court, when it comes to the conditions under which it's deporting illegal immigrants right now, regardless of whatever promises they make. And that's when the Supreme Court's been working hard to be agreeable to the government as well. This is pretty much the last administration whose promises I would be trusting. But yeah, we'll see. Oh, and on that note, by the way, I'm pretty generous to the Supreme Court generally. But I don't trust this court much either. Under Trump, the Supreme Court has responded to 86 cases in which lower courts blocked the government with injunctions. They lifted 77% of them. They responded to 21 cases under Biden in which the lower courts blocked the government with injunctions. Guess what percentage of injunctions they lifted there? 0%. 77% to 0%. So look, do I trust them to be literally the only group of people standing between us and a rampant lawless Trump? Not really, but they're all we've got. So this seems like a highly dubious reassurance, but hopefully it will work for you. Finally, Kavanaugh noted the APA solution. Nationwide injunctions are effectively still available under the Administrative Procedure Act in many cases. And this is not one of those cases so far, but the vast majority of injunctions are actually through this act. Almost all the injunctions in Trump's first term were this type. This is when the courts set aside agency actions because they're capricious or poorly thought through. But it has to be an agency action. An executive order alone doesn't cut it. Until the executive order asks an agency to do something, and then you can put a freeze on the agency, which is what they normally do and what they might do with this eventually. Even in this case, though, it does have to be the agencies implementing the executive order, and as soon as they try, bang, lawsuit under the Administrative Procedure Act. You get the actions vacated universally, solves your problem. By the way, literally the very next week, a district court judge handed down one of these judgments just to show they can. Judge Randolph Moss ruled that it was unlawful that Trump in day one proclaimed that he was shutting down their right to claim asylum at the southern border because there was an invasion. He said that didn't cut it, and it was a violation of the Administrative Procedure Act to set aside federal actions he found to be not in accordance with the law, which he says that was not. In conclusion, there are a bunch of ways of dealing with a lawless administration federally, and the court has given litigants 30 days to try some of them out before the birthright citizenship order can take effect in 28 states. Because 22 states are already party to these lawsuits, they are about to have injunctions at least, which would make no sense for half the country to have birthright citizenship and half not to. So this is a great case for seeing how these alternative solutions will work. As I said, some of them are already in train right now. And it's hard for me to criticise the decision too much until we see what happens. If the court's prepared to use these other methods for achieving the same ends as national injunctions, then fine. They haven't done any damage. They've just lightened up an increasingly loose part of the way the legal system has been working recently. But if all of a sudden they start drawing up these other methods too, like Alito suggested, then they have created genuine impunity for Trump, and that would be a genuine concern. It would be an unmitigated disaster. But unlike those on social media, I don't think we should catastrophize this decision yet for now, until we know for sure. And now I look down at the clock, we are at least 6 minutes over. I think while it's cute to go 3-0-0-0-0 every single ep, I think in this case we're gonna have to push the friendship and just go 6 minutes over, because I don't know how the hell Lockie would cut 6 minutes out of this episode. I don't want to put you through it, Lockie. We'll break the trend just for once. Only once. It's not going to be the beginning of a lot of us slipping. We're going to keep it to 3-0-0-0, but just for once, when we're going to come back from the holiday, we will end now at about 3 hours, 6 minutes, 3 hours, 7 minutes, something like that.
Christmas and July treat.
It is Christmas and July treat. That's right, indeed. Until Friday, I'll see you then. Stay peppy.